What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was the only boy in an all-girls ninja high school? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Yuki Rito watched as his secret, or not so secret crush, depending on who you were, walked past him in the hallway at his school. Like most people, Rito was a fairly normal high school student, with no real unusual or unique features. He was 16 years old and stood at about 164 centimeters. He was neither skinny nor fat and didn't look all that athletic. His eyes were a slight golden brown and he was wearing the standard green pants and tie with a white undershirt and light tan blazer combo of the school he went to. The only feature about him that could be considered unique was his messy orange hair, an unusual color no matter where you were. Today's the day, he thought to himself in determination. There was a fire in his eyes that were only present on days like this. Day in which he decided to confess to the girl he loved. Today's the day I confessed to Haruna-chan. Ever since he had first met his crush, Haruna, a rather pretty girl in his grade with purple hair and eyes, it had been love at first sight. Her beauty had always astounded and affected him in ways no other female ever had. But it was her kindness that had truly earned her Rito's love. I'm going to do it. He could see it all now. He would walk up to Haruna, boldly and with a confident gait never before seen. He would get down on one knee, taking her hand in his and professing his love for her. Then he would ask her to be his girlfriend, and she would say, "Confessing to Haruna again today, Rito?" "Yes, today I'm gonna." Rito started only to stop as he realized the voice had come from directly behind him. Ah! With a loud shout he spun around to look at the person that had managed to sneak up on him. Said person was a young man wearing the same clothing as him, green pants and tie with a tan blazer. He had spiky blonde hair that went down to his shoulders, with two jaw-length bangs framing his face and a spiky fringe hovering over his eyes. Said eyes were blue and held a piercing quality that Rito had always found unnerving. He always felt those eyes were looking into his very soul. Perhaps the oddest feature about this man were the 6 whisker marks on his face, 3 on each cheek, running horizontally across his face. Damn it, Naruto. How many times have I told you not to sneak up on someone like this? You always do this, constantly sneaking up behind other people and scaring the living daylights out of them. Especially me. Finished with his tirade, Rito stopped, his shoulders hunching as he began breathing heavily, looking for all the world like he had just run a marathon. Ha ha ha. Gomen, Naruto said, waving a hand in front of his face as if to ward off Rito's comical anger. Not that he seemed to be all that affected by the orange-haired teen's anger. Indeed, it looked as if he found more amusement in Rito's blustering than anything else. So, the blonde started again, a sly look on his face as he leaned down to look at Rito face to face. Being one of the tallest people in school, close to 5'8", most of the students only reached chest height with Naruto. In order to look at people eye to eye, the blonde needed to lean or bend down. I see you're going to confess to Haruna-chan again today. You know, this will the 256th time you do this. So far you've failed at every single attempt at capturing her heart. Are you sure you're up to this? Of course I am sure. This time will definitely be different, Rito said, holding a shaking fist up to his face. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. Naruto smirked at Rito, making said male blink at him in confusion. The blonde's smirk widened as he said, "You're going to succeed this time because I'm going to help you." Rito gaped at the whiskered male. "That's right," Naruto said. "Ever since I came to this high school I've had to watch your terrible attempts at confessing to Haruna. The first time it was funny, watching you fail so miserably that you actually ran home during lunch. The second time it was funny, the third it started getting old, and now," the blonde shrugged. "Let's just say watching you fail consecutively so many times is beginning to get too painful for me to watch. Therefore, I am going to help you confess to her." How? Asked Rito, scratching the back of his head in confusion. "Easy, we're going to walk up to her and you're going to confess. Now, come on." Naruto didn't even give Rito a chance to say anything after that as he grabbed the orange-haired teen by the jacket and began dragging him along. "Let's go find Haruna-chan." Wait. Rito struggled to remove the blonde's hand, or at least make Naruto stop. It was unfortunate for him that Uzumaki Naruto was the strongest person in school. Even the PE teacher wouldn't dare mess with him, especially after the last time he was humiliating in front of the entire student body by the whiskered male. I can't do it right now. I have to get the timing right. If you wait until you feel the timing is right, then we're going to be waiting forever, Naruto shot back. Your sense of timing sucks. That's half the reason you haven't been able to confess to Haruna-chan. Seriously, every time you feel the timing is right, something bad happens. Which is exactly why I'm choosing the timing for you. Now stop struggling, it will only make things that much harder for you. Despite his friend's advice, Rito continued struggling against the blonde. This resulted in him getting bodily dragged throughout the school in front of the entire student population. It was fortunate for Rito that Naruto was the one dragging him, otherwise people might have made fun of the 16-year-old high school student. As it was, the blonde that was effortlessly hauling him around cut an imposing enough figure that none of the male population dared to say anything against him. They soon found Haruna with 3 of her friends. Without even thinking about it, Naruto walked right up to the group and cut into their conversation. "Excuse me," he said, grabbing their attention. He gave the group a smile. "I was wondering if you 3 could help me with something." Rito almost groaned when 3 of the 4 girls began to swoon over the blonde. Aside from being the most athletic and academic student in school, Naruto was also the most popular, especially with the girls in school. His handsome features combined with his open and easygoing attitude had drawn nearly all of the girls to him. The fact that almost every girl also seemed to have this strong urge to touch his whisker marks, all them claiming they were the cutest things they had ever seen, only added to his general appeal. This had led to many of the male students hating Naruto, though few would actually try and harm him. Rito was just glad that Haruna didn't seem to be affected by his looks and personality to any serious extent. "How can we help you, Naruto-sama?" asked the girls in their girlish and excitable voice. It was a typical response and Rito had gotten used to it by now. He didn't know why the girls called him Sama, but then, none of the other guys did. Though there was much debate on the subject, in truth, Rito didn't really care. Naruto pulled the 3 girls aside and huddled with them. "Listen, my friend is having some troubles confessing to the girl of his dreams, and so I've decided to help give him a push in the right direction. I want you girls to help me take Haruna-chan and Rito to the equipment shed and lock them inside." The 3 looked unsure at his request, and so the blonde decided to use his secret weapon. "If you do this, I promise to take each of you out on a date." "A date?" the girls said at the same time. It was an eerie form of synchronicity that only females could accomplish. For several seconds the 3 high school girls stood still, their face going red and their eyes glazing over as they imagined a date with the blonde. One of the girls ended up getting a nosebleed and actually looked close to passing out. In the end they agreed to help Naruto, stating, "While we don't really like Yuki-san, we'll agree to help since it's you asking." "Excellent," Naruto said, standing up and clapping his hands together in gratitude. He rushed back over to Rito and Haruna, both of whom had been standing together awkwardly, and smiled. "All right, you two, time to go." "What? Wait, hold on a moment, where are you taking us?" Rito shouted as he and Haruna were both lifted into the air. Naruto ignored the orange-haired teens shouting, along with the startled and frightened noises Haruna was making as they ran through the school was once again. It wasn't long before they reached the equipment shed located on the opposite side of the school. Acting before Rito could even gain his bearings, Naruto threw both him and his crush into the shed, closed and locked the door. "Naruto!" Rito shouted as he stood up, rushed over to the door and grabbed onto the handle. He tried opening it, even going so far as to place both his feet on the wall in an effort to get some leverage. Yet no matter how hard he tried, the door would not budge. "Hey, Naruto, let me out. Let me out. I can't do it like this. You need to let me out." Despite his shouting, Naruto seemed to be ignoring him. That, or he had already left, which wouldn't surprise Rito one bit. Sighing, the orange-haired high schooler dropped to the floor and wondered what he should do next. As he did, a small piece of paper fell out of the inside of his blazer. Curiously, he picked it up and uncrumbled the sheet. On it was the neat handwriting that he recognized as Naruto's. It said, "By now I'm sure you've noticed that the door to the room is locked. I've also taken the liberty of barring the windows. I regret that it has come to this, but until you confess to Haruna I won't let you out." That said, There is food located in a fridge that I have hidden behind the basketball storage bins in the corner. Since I don't know how long it will take until you confess, I figured you might need something to keep you satiate. Good luck. Naruto. At the end of the message was a chibi Naruto with a fox-like grin, holding out up the peace sign. Rito felt his eyes twitching as he stared at the letter. Somehow, I feel I should have seen this coming, he said to himself. The entire year I've known him, Naruto has never been able to keep out of other people's business. And now I'm stuck here with Na. Trailing off at the end, he blinked several times as the realization hit him. He was alone with Haruna. Now's my chance, he thought to himself, his excitement beginning to rise. Now's my chance to finally confess to Haruna. If I get out of this alive, I'll have to thank Naruto for being so nosy. Anyo, Yuki-kun. At the sound of the feminine voice, Rito froze. Turning, he found Haruna standing not 3 feet away from him. She was looking down at the ground, her eyes occasionally moving up to meet his, only to look away a few seconds later. Rito gulped. Come on, Rito. Now is your chance. You can't screw this up. He stuttered out, only to stop when Haruna looked at him. Gulping, he tried again. Haruna looked at him, blinking as a confused expression crossed her face. She looked slightly concerned because of how much Rito was stuttering. Were said male more attentive, he might have noticed. As it was, he was so busy trying to get the words out that he couldn't even think straight, much less notice the small nuances that dictated female behavior and emotions. Come on, you can do this, Rito. Just say it, I like you, he shouted, bowing down at the waist so he wouldn't have to look at Haruna. Said girl's eyes widened as she took a step back. Not seeing the action, Rito continued. I've liked you for a really long time. And I was hoping, that is, if you want to. I was hoping you would go out with me. Rito kept his eyes closed, his body bowed low, for fear that Haruna would reject him. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, beating nearly 2,000 miles a minute. It felt like it was attempting to beat its way out of him, it was going so fast. His nerves were beginning to fray as the silence continued. Maybe he shouldn't have confessed to her. What if she didn't like him? What if she thought he was weird? Or gross? Or some kind of loser? She could think he wasn't worth her time and tell him that she didn't want anything to do with him. Or, okay, Rito blinked, looked up at Haruna, then blinked again. Said girl blushed as she looked down at her feet. I would like to go out with you too. The truth is, I've always liked you. Rito found himself gaping. Haruna had always liked him? Why hadn't he known this? Unknowing of his inner thoughts, Haruna continued. Yuki-kun has always been a kind person. You were always taking care of the plants after school, making sure they were watered. Most people forget about watering the plants after school, but you never failed to tend to them. That's why I admire Yuki-kun a lot. You like me? Asked Rito, making sure he had heard her correctly. Haruna looked away, looked back, nodded once, then looked away again. Still wanting to be sure she liked him, he said, then, will you go out with me? Haruna blushed as she looked at him. A wide smile split Rito's face as he jumped up, grabbing Haruna in his excitement and spinning her around, much to said girl's embarrassment. Unbeknownst to them, one blonde-haired, blue-eyed male was hidden amongst the equipment. He looked at them with a smile before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Several miles outside of school, Uzumaki Naruto stopped walking as the memories of his clone hit him. He looked back at the school, a small smile playing on his face. Way to go, kid, he said softly to himself. A rueful chuckle escaped his lips. Who would have thought that after living for somewhere around 3,000 years I would be reduced to playing matchmaker between high school kids? Shaking his head, Naruto turned around and restarted his walk home. As he did, his eyes took in the city he was currently living in. While Tokyo had been the center of Japan for a long time, it always amazed the blonde how much it had changed in the past 100 years. When last he had been in the city, somewhere around 1 to 150 years ago, it had been a decent-sized city with closely spaced buildings and shops. Now it was a bustling metropolis of large, towering skyscrapers, crisscrossing highways, and heavily populated suburban areas. The place Naruto was living in at the moment was one of the less populated housing districts on the outskirts of Tokyo. Far enough away that he wasn't hemmed in by the crushing population of the big city, but close enough that it would only take a 2-hour train ride to reach the center. The district he was living in was a nice, albeit plain residential area. The houses were all the same, standard 2-story buildings with a slanted roof, a balcony and a small backyard. There were only small differences to distinguish one house from another, those being the tiny altercations made by the people who lived there. A variation in a person's garden here, a small flag hung up on a roof there. Diminutive yet significant contrasts that allowed Naruto to tell who lived where. His own house was located on a corner, in fact he lived right next door to Rito Yuki. That was actually how they had become friends. Him living so close to the nice yet clumsy teen had ensured that the young man would be the first person Naruto met. And having seen the kid and how horrible his luck was in many areas, the blonde had decided to more or less take Rito under his wing. Even if that was sometimes more of an occupational hazard than a privileged position. Normally I'd be walking home with Rito, Naruto mused with a grin. I wonder how he and Haruna are getting along. HYA. I should probably inform Mika-chan that her brother isn't going to be coming home anytime soon. With that thought in mind, Naruto walked up to the house belonging to Rito and his younger sister. Stopping at the entrance he rang the doorbell, then crossed his arms and leaned against the wall while he waited. Coming, came a shout from the inside. The sound of footsteps resounded from behind the door. A few seconds later the front door opened and Yuki Mikan's head peeked out from the crack. Yuki Mikan was a cute 12-year-old girl with brown eyes and long brown hair that was standardly done up in a slight ponytail that made the back top part of her head look like a pineapple. The hair that she didn't catch in her ponytail, which was quite a lot, was let down to flow behind her back, stopping at mid-back. She was wearing a pair of short jeans that stopped at mid-thigh, and an orange sweatshirt with a yellow undershirt. Despite her young age she was already beginning to develop a womanly figure, and Naruto knew when she got older that Rito would have his hands full trying to keep men away from his younger sister. The minute the girl saw him she swung the door open the rest of the way and rushed forward, smashed into his torso, engulfing him in a hug as she shouted. Naruto Ni-chan. Hey there, Mika-chan, Naruto said with a chuckle as he ruffled Mikan's hair. When he had first moved in and met and befriended Rito, he had been invited over to the orange-haired teen's house. It was there he had met Mika for the first time. At first, things had been very awkward for the blonde and Rito as the young girl seemed to have developed one of those love-at-first-sight crushes on him. It was not the first time such a thing had happened when Naruto met the younger or older sister of a person he became friends with. He even remembered one case in England when he had been posing as a college student and met with a friend's mother. The woman had been a 30-something-year-old widow with her husband dying in World War II and when she had met him had done her best to seduce him. It hadn't worked and Naruto thankfully managed to leave the country after faking his death. Since then he had been careful on how he reacted when meeting new girls. Thankfully the girl's crush only lasted for a month and since then Naruto had been something of a second older brother, or the older brother she always wanted if one went by Mikan's words. This of course was a point of contention and much teasing between the three of them. Mikan would always complain that Rito was an unreliable and useless brother, while Naruto would tease Rito about being cooler than him and Mikan about having a crush on her second, Oni-chan. Rito would always end up skulking in a corner with a rain cloud over his head and Mikan would blush up a storm. They were fun times in Naruto's opinion. He would be sad when he was forced to leave this place. What are you doing here? Mikan asked, then she looked around. And where is Rito? Oh, he's going to be a bit late, Naruto replied with a smile and a hum. Mikan looked at Naruto suspiciously. What did you do? A grin worked its way to the blonde's face. Oh, nothing much. Just locked your brother in a gym equipment locker room with Haruna-chan. They won't be able to open the door for another. Naruto paused to look at his watch, 2 hours. I figured that would be enough time for him to finally man up and confess. So you finally decided to get involved in Rito's relationship problems, Mika said. She shook her head and sighed. I was honestly wondering when you would finally grow tired of watching him flounder around. I swear he's useless when it comes to women, and a lot of other things. Ah, now don't be dissing on your brother, Naruto chided. He's just not as experienced, well-traveled or awesome as I am. It's only natural that it would take some time getting his cool factor up to snuff, that, and several pushes in the right direction. Right, Mikan said with a sweat drop forming on the back of her head. So are you staying for dinner then? It's Monday, so normally you would stay with us for dinner, right? Not today, Naruto replied. With Rito stuck with Haruna for the next few hours, I think it would be best if I stayed home. Who knows what kind of things you might try and do to me if we were all alone. Bibaka, Mikan stuttered with a slight blush. I wouldn't do anything like that. Good to know, Naruto chuckled before ruffling the girl's hair. Mikan blushed harder and shoved his hand off, making him smile. Anyways, I just came to tell you that. I'll see you later. Okay, bye, Mikan said as she shut the door. Naruto walked over to his house, unlocked the door and stepped inside. He made his way into the kitchen, walking over to his pantry and opened it. Inside were several hundred boxes of instant ramen. They filled the entire pantry, covering every square inch. Even after thousands of years, his love of ramen had not diminished, and despite being capable of cooking other foods, ramen would always remain his #1 favorite. Hence the reason he had what had been lovingly dubbed the ramen pantry by him. What should I go with today? Mumbled Naruto as he grabbed several cups of ramen and looked them over. Miso, chicken, pork, beef, shrimp, crab. After several minutes of this, he decided to go with one of each flavor, that way he wouldn't have to feel so conflicted about his food choice. Besides that, cup ramen was small and unfilling. He only ate instant ramen when he didn't feel like cooking his own meals. Ripping the tops off, Naruto poured water into each cup and placed one of them in the microwave. He waited the 3 minutes it took to make the ramen, complaining the whole time. Damn instant ramen. How can it be instant if it takes 3 minutes to cook? You'd think that after 3,000 years someone would find a way to make instant ramen truly instant. Maybe I should that. There might even be a profit in it if I can cut into the ramen market. His thoughts were cut off as the chime of the microwave sounded. He quickly opened the door, took the ramen out, placed another one in, started the timer again, then began eating the already made ramen. This act was completed several times as he would eat his ramen, while waiting for the other ramen he had in the microwave being made. When the blonde was done, he threw the cups away and headed upstairs. He entered the bathroom not long after, stripped out of his clothes and folded them up before putting them in a basket. After walking into the room on the opposite side of the changing room, he went over to the tub and turned on the water. There was a slight glow on the faucet as the seals began working, heating up the water in the bathtub quicker than it would normally. While waiting for the tub to finish filling up, Naruto used the shower head to wash himself off. As he cleaned up, he let his mind wander. His thoughts took him to the past, a place they usually went when he let them. He had lived a long life, due to a combination of his Uzumaki heritage, his abilities as a sage and an all-powerful, world-destroying demon sealed inside of his gut. He had gained what many would-be madmen dreamed of: immortality. However, while someone like Orochimaru would have orgasmed at the thought of being an all-powerful immortal, to Naruto it was more of a curse than anything else. His life had been filled with being alone. Even when he was with the friends he made in whatever century he was living in, the feeling never really left. It only stayed its hand for a time. Everyone in Seinen High says I should get a girl. He chuckled a bit at that. The male population at school, with the sole exception of Rito, hated him due to the fact that so many of the girls swooned over him, yet he refused to date a single one of them. Not to say he hadn't gone on dates, but he always felt there was difference between going on a date and dating someone. He switched off the water, both to the tub and the shower head, before sinking himself into the steaming liquid. A sigh escaped the blonde's lips. Even if I were to get a girlfriend, it would never last, would it? Eventually I would be forced to leave before people discovered I was immortal. I wonder how all of the friends I made would feel if they knew my secret. A dry laugh escaped his throat. They'd probably be frightened and run off. Even if they didn't, how could I have any kind of serious relationship when they're just going to die a few decades later anyways? His thoughts trailed off as he leaned back in the tub and shut his eyes. He must have fallen asleep, because the next thing he knew there was a bright flash of blue light coming from the water. An explosion caused the water in his tub to shoot into the air, and Naruto was so surprised by the sudden and unprecedented attack that the old and disused ninja instincts he had long since had were unable to actually prevent him from doing anything other than throwing his hands out in order to protect himself. In doing this, the first thing, Naruto's hands were not any kind of painful attacks, not the sting of some form of weapon or the burning or cutting of a jutsu. No, the moment his hands went out to ward off whatever attack was coming his way were a pair of well-defined and large S. Naruto opened his eyes, which had closed during his attempt to shield himself from what he had assumed was an attack on his person. He blinked several times when he saw his hands groping a set of beautiful S. They were large. If Naruto had to guess, he would say they had a total circumference of 89 centimeters. Yet despite being completely free of the confines of a bra, they didn't sag. A slight moan from the female he was touching brought his mind back into the focus. He looked up and found his breath hitching in his throat. Nestled in between his legs was a highly attractive teenage girl with long bubblegum pink hair, emerald green eyes, and a curvaceous, almost perfect, hourglass figure. Her most distinguishing feature was the tail, which extends down from the base of her back. It was long, thin, and ended with a heart-shaped tip. It seemed to move behind her at random, and Naruto couldn't help but wonder if it was real or not. She reminded him of Sakura, a much hotter Sakura with a larger chest and wider hips, but the green eyes and pink hair was almost identical to those of the girl that had been his first crush. The memories seeing this girl brought back were almost physically painful, and it took an effort of will to push them back. Escape successful, the girl said, snapping Naruto out of his momentary lapse of reality. He blinked as the girl's eyes focused on him, and for a single, solitary second the blonde's old fear of women, one that was ironically enough brought about by his first crush, came back, and he was almost sure this girl would attempt to beat him within an inch to his life, despite the fact that she was the one who had randomly appeared within his tub naked. She did none of those things, instead smiling as she said, "Hello." Naruto opened his mouth but no words came out. It took a few moments to get his vocal cords to respond, and when they finally did, he said, "Hello. Who are you?" It was perhaps not the most elegant or relevant question he could have asked, but sometimes it was better to start off with the small things and work your way up. He was still having trouble processing the fact that some random hot female with a tail had appeared in his bathtub naked. "I'm Lala, from the planet Deviluk," the girl replied. "Uh-huh," Naruto nodded noncommittally. "So you're an extraterrestrial then?" "Yes, I suppose an earthling, like you could call me that," she replied. She got another nod in response as Naruto's brain finally fully rebooted. He decided to ignore the fact that she was an alien for now, he would deal with it later. Looking at the naked girl in his tub for a moment, he computed the best course of action to take in a situation like this. Thankfully, living for 3,000 years had more or less desensitized him to most of the situations life could throw at him. Standing up, Naruto unplugged the drain to the tub and stepped out. The girl's eyes followed him as he grabbed 2 towels, walked back over to her and held out the second one to her. "Wrap this around yourself and come with me. I'll make some tea and you can explain to me why you suddenly appeared in my bathtub." "Okay," Lala replied. Oddly enough, she didn't seem at all bothered by the fact that she was naked, nor the fact that she had just been groped by Naruto. She simply wrapped the towel around her body and stepped out of the tub. What followed were several long minutes of silence as Naruto led Lala to the living room and had her sit down. He then went into the kitchen and selected some tea, an herbal tea that he had created from the garden he had out back. Hopefully it would help him keep calm, because despite the fact that he had seen much in his life, the events of a few minutes ago still had him somewhat shell-shocked. When the tea was finished, he poured the steaming liquid into a pair of cups, grabbed them and walked back into the living room. There he found Lala sitting on the couch, a cheerful and inquisitive expression on her face as she looked around the room. Her tail was wagging behind her in a fashion that almost seemed to mirror the look on her face. "Here you go," he said, setting the tea down. He received a thank you and took a seat on the chair to the left of the couch. Taking a sip of his tea, Naruto sighed as he felt a slight wave of heat move down his throat, then encompassing his whole body as the soothing herbs relaxed his mind and muscles. It seemed to have a similar, possibly even more pronounced effect on Lala. As soon as she took a sip, her entire body seemed to sag as a groan escaped her lips. "Sugoi," she said as she sunk into the couch. "This tastes so good." "Thank you," Naruto replied as he took another sip of tea before setting it down on a glass holder. "Now, why don't I start this off by introducing myself? My name is Uzumaki Naruto." "Pleased to meet you, Naruto-kun," Lala said, and Naruto actually blinked in surprise when she just automatically added an affectionate suffix to his name. Normally a girl would wait at least a day before calling him that, though the girls in his class this century seemed to prefer calling him Naruto-sama. He shook the thought off as irrelevant and continued. Nice to meet you too, Lala-san. I hope you don't mind me asking about why or perhaps how you suddenly appeared in my bathtub. Ah, that would be because of the Pion warp coon that I made. Lala announced proudly as she held out her wrist and showed him a small device attached to it. The thing looked like a silver creature bracelet. It had a centerpiece that looked like some kind of alien creature with a heart-shaped head that held a pair of red eyes, connected to a heart-shaped body that was attached to a tail by a pair of claws on either side. It was a very odd-looking device, and not something Naruto had ever seen. Given that it was apparently an alien artifact, he wasn't all that surprised. Lala continued her explanation of the device as Naruto looked it over. Although I can't define where it goes, it can instantly warp a living thing for a short distance. I see, Naruto said. Curiosity got the better of him and he switched from the chair to the couch, sitting next to Lala as he looked at the bracelet. So basically it's like some kind of teleportation device that allows for short distance, instantaneous transportation a certain distance away. It's randomized so you don't actually know where you'll warp to, however. I'm going to hazard a guess and say it's some kind of last-ditch escape device, used only in dire circumstances. He looked from the Pion warp coon to Lala. Am I right? That's right, Lala said. For some reason she seemed happy that he understood what she was saying, perhaps even overly happy for something so simple. I used it when I was in the escape pod of my spaceship, and by chance I ended up in your bathtub. That makes sense, I guess, Naruto replied. He frowned as another thought occurred to him. And why are you naked? Ah, well, it only warps living things, so objects like clothes are left behind, Naruto finished, earning a slightly embarrassed smile from Lala. It seems like it has a few kinks that need to be worked out, but I think that's a really awesome device. And you say you built it? That's impressive. Ah, thank you, the girl replied with an enthusiastic and happy smile. It was so innocent and infectious that Naruto actually found himself smiling as well. He couldn't really say whether he was pleased or displeased with this situation, but if nothing else this girl had just helped him cure several thousand years worth of boredom. You're welcome, he said. So, awesome warping device aside, I suppose the next question I want to ask is why you had to use something like this in the first place. Lala smiled as she let one of her hands trail along the wrist holding her warp device. I was being chased, she said. Naruto narrowed his eyes a little but didn't speak, letting her continue unabated. I thought I would be safe if I escaped to Earth. But the pursuers came and my ship was broken down. I was almost captured and brought back. She held up her arm holding the bracelet. If it wasn't for this bracelet I would have been taken. I see, Naruto said, more for wanting to say anything than actually having something to say. He took in a deep breath and blew it out before deciding on his course of action. I won't force you into telling me why you're on the run, it's not really any of my business. But I will help you out while you stay here. Ah, you will? Said Lala, her eyes going impossibly wide as a hopeful smile shone on her face. Of course, I can't just leave someone in need of help to fend for themselves, Naruto said with a shrug. He would have said more but before he could speak again, Lala had launched herself at him, knocking him to the ground as she held him in a fierce hug. Pushing his admittedly lewd thoughts to the far reaches of his mind, Naruto brought himself into a sitting position and did what he could to pry the girl off. She had a surprisingly strong grip, and he was actually forced to reinforce his muscles with chakra, something he hadn't done for a long time, in order to get her off of him. You're welcome, Naruto said. He stood up and had to rewrap his towel as it threatened to come off. He held his hand out to Lala, which was taken by said girl as he pulled her to her feet. He was just about to suggest they move upstairs so they could get dressed when the door behind him opened. Spinning around, the blonde was just about to attack whoever had broken into his house when his eyes spotted an odd-looking creature with black bat-like wings and swirly eyes fly past him. Lala-sama, it shouted as it jumped into Lala's waiting arms. Thank God you're okay, Lala-sama. Peek, Lala replied with just as much enthusiasm. I'm glad to see you're safe too. Thank goodness the ship didn't leave the Earth's atmosphere yet. It was here that Naruto decided to interrupt. So, Lala. Who's the weird-looking creature? Said creature turned to look at him and Naruto couldn't be sure, due to the swirl eyes, but he almost thought it was glaring at him. Weird looking, it said in an insulted tone. Ah, this Peak, Lala introduced, an all-purpose costume robot that I made. Nice to meet you, it said, seeming to have forgotten Naruto's insulting comment. Pleased to make your acquaintance as well, Naruto replied. Costume robot, huh? So then I take it Peak can transform into clothing, right? That's right. Peak, do your thing. Asu. Transform. Dress form. Peak shouted before he began to glow. Naruto watched in interest as the little robot seemed to burst and transform into what looked like some kind of rope that surrounded Lala. It wrapped itself around her legs, then her rear end. Naruto actually gulped when it tightened around her shapely ass, an action which was repeated when it did the same thing to her ass. There were several flashes of light as the ropes seemingly transformed themselves into clothing. Really, Lala's clothing looked more like a female-shaped, life-sized version of Peak. Though Naruto had to admit she looked very cute, and her outfit seemed to suit her. Of course, since he could see every crevice and curve of her body, Naruto wouldn't complain. He may not consider himself a pervert, but he was still a male. Is it too tight, Lala-sama? Asked Peak, making Naruto blink when he heard the voice. Nope, it's perfect, Lala told her. Clothes. She held up her arms and moved around a bit, causing her ass to jiggle. It's great that you were able to come here so quickly. She spun around a few times, letting the skirt-like part of her clothing spin a bit. After a few test spins, she turned to Naruto and smiled. Well, what do you think? It looks good, right? It's cute, Naruto said. I've never seen an outfit quite like that before. Tee-hee, Lala giggled. By the way, Lala-sama, Peak interrupted. What do you plan to do now? Ah, Naruto-kun has agreed to help me. Lala exclaimed. Just then said Blonde's senses went on high alert as he felt two presences approaching his room. While his abilities seemed to have dulled from disuse, they were still quick enough that he was able to grab Lala and move her into a corner before spinning around in a defensive stance as two men in black suits and sunglasses appeared in his room. You've been quite troublesome to track down, one of them said, seeming to ignore Naruto's presence. I'll have to make sure the freedom of your hands and feet are taken away before we leave Earth. Peak, Lala said in a deadpan tone. Didn't I tell you to make sure no one followed you when coming here? Hi, Baka robot, Lala shouted as she began pouting and waving her arms in the air in frustration. Soon enough she started moving around from one foot to the other in what looked like a comical dance, rather than the actions of someone who was angry. It was amusing to Naruto as he watched Lala berate her clothing, which was attempting to apologize. Were it not for the fact that he had two unwanted guests in his house, he would have enjoyed simply sitting back and watching the girl work herself into a frenzy. As it was, however, he still had a small problem that needed to be taken care of. Turning his eyes back to the two men, he gave them a light glare. I don't know who you two Yakuza wannabes are, but I'm only going to give you one warning. Leave now, or suffer the most brutal ass-kicking of your life. You think you can scare us, kid? Asked the one with darker skin. How about we give you a warning? Step aside or we'll have to hurt you. Kid? Naruto said in disbelief. He cursed himself for being granted eternal youth with his immortality. It was one of the things he hated most. Despite his 3,000 years of age, everyone he met mistook him for a high school student. It was actually difficult just for him to get into a college because he looked so young. And while being young-looking had its boons, the fact that no one seemed to take him seriously bugged the crap out of him. Looks like I'm gonna have to teach you to respect your elders, boy, Naruto spoke in a dangerous tone. His eyes were being overshadowed by his hair, blocking his angry glare from view. However, that only made the look more effective, and despite themselves, the two men shivered. Who do you think you are, punk? Shouted one of them, getting over his hesitation with bravado. I'll show you who's boss here. The man ran at Naruto, who had yet to move. It was unfortunate for the two thugs that they were too busy charging towards the blonde to notice the small smirk he had on his face. If they did, they might have been spared from the painful encounter they were about to have. As the first one, the male with darker skin, came in, fist swinging in an attempt to knock Naruto upside the head, said blonde seemingly disappeared from his view. Less than a second after that he was introduced to a new level of pain as a foot met with his jaw, forcing his teeth to shatter as they were smashed together. The dark-skinned space Yakuza didn't even get a chance to scream in pain as he was sent sailing into, and then through the ceiling, flying high into the air where he disappeared in a small twinkle. The other man didn't stand a chance as Naruto used his great arm strength to shift his body, rotating himself and moving until his feet were pointed towards the man who was trying to halt his forward progression. Without hesitation, Naruto's feet shot out in a buck kick that caught the man dead center in his chest. There was a loud crack, followed by a whoosh of air, then a scream as the man was sent flying backwards. He crashed through the window and quickly plummeted to the ground below. Naruto breathed in and out slowly as he stood up straight and began clapping imaginary dust off his hands. "And that's that," he said. "Sugoi." Naruto turned around and almost shouted in surprise as he saw Lala's face right next to his. There was an odd look in her face and he could even see stars shining in her eyes. Having not seen a look quite that impressed in a long time, the blonde actually felt himself blush a bit. "That was so cool," Lala exclaimed. "The way you handled those two was amazing. You were all paw, and pow, and they went whoosh." Her exclamations and sound effects were followed by wild hand gestures made to look like mock punches, followed at the end by her waving her arms to show how the two men he defeated were sent sailing. "Ehehe, that was nothing," Naruto said with a grin. He quickly got his mind back on track. Getting the first thing he needed done, he opened a drawer in his dresser and dressed himself in a basic pair of black pajama bottoms and an orange tank top. As he dressed, he continued speaking, "I've been trained in combat since I was 6, some loser wannabe Yakuza aren't going to be a threat to me." Huh? He paused in his self-admittedly arrogant praise when his eyes caught sight of a green, blinking light. It was connected to a device that looked like a small tube. Picking it up, he held the thing to his eyes and looked it over. "What's this?" he wondered out loud. "Oh, that's a tracking device," Lala explained helpfully. "It's used to track other people's location in case they get lost. Which means that more people like those Yakuza guys will be coming soon," Naruto reasoned to himself. He sighed. "I don't want to make any more of a mess of my room than I already have. Looks like we're going to have to leave so I can find a more suitable location to fight." Huh? Lala looked at him with innocent curiosity as he moved over to her. Curiosity was replaced when Naruto scooped her into his arms, which elicited a surprised squeal from the pink-haired female. "Naruto? Sorry for this," the blonde said as he hopped out of the window and onto an adjacent rooftop. "But I want to move fast. It will be easier this way." Without further ado, he quickly began hopping from roof to roof, moving at a pace that no human could match. Unseen by him, Rito and Haruna, who had both managed to escape from his imprisonment of them, saw the blonde before he sped off. "Was that Naruto?" asked Haruna in surprise. Rito blinked before turning to his new girlfriend. "I think so." They both turned back to where Naruto had been to see that he wasn't there anymore. Both of them wondered if they might have just imagined him standing there with a pink-haired female in his arms. After all, people just didn't disappear like that, right? As Naruto carried her bridal style while jumping across the rooftops, Lala found herself looking at the blonde's determined features. Why are you helping me so much?" asked Lala. While Naruto didn't turn his head to look at her, his eyes roved down to stare into hers. He didn't even break his stride as he said, "I said I'd help you, didn't I? Once I say I'll do something, I never go back on my word." "But now you're being chased because of me," Lala countered. "So why?" "That's a dumb question," Naruto said, winking at Lala to let her know he wasn't saying it to be harmful. "You're in some kind of trouble, that's why. What kind of person would I be if I just left you to these people, when I know that I have the ability to help? I don't know about anyone else, but I don't want to be the kind of guy who would just leave someone like you high and dry because I didn't want to get my hands dirty." Lala's eyes widened. Naruto. Naruto reached the end of the line of houses a few seconds later. Pushing off the edge, he jumped, reaching past the wall and landing in a crouch. Utilizing the kinetic energy from the impact, he sprung forward in a burst of speed and made his way into the park. He stopped, looked around for a moment, then nodded. "This looks like as good a place as any," he said to himself as he set Lala back on her feet. "A good place for what?" asked Lala. Naruto grinned at her. "Why, to make my grand stand, of course. While my hits were pretty hard, it shouldn't have done any serious damage beyond busting a few teeth and ribs. Those guys aren't weak enough to be anything more than dazed by my attacks. They'll be coming soon, and we can't run forever. So I need an open space in order to use more of my fighting potential. I may be a little rusty, but my skills should be more than enough to deal with goons like them." Such confidence, came a voice that resounded throughout the clearing. Naruto's eyes widened as his body acted on its own, sliding into a fighting position as he pushed Lala behind him. It didn't take long for him to spot the most likely source of the voice, a large UFO floating above his head with thousands of blinking lights on the underside. It was so bright it was a wonder no one had seen it yet. A beam of light shot out from the center and hit the ground a few meters away. Seconds later, a large man with white hair and odd segment armor and a red cape. At the same time, the two men Naruto had previously downed ran up and stepped on either side of the man who floated down from the beam of light. The blonde was pleased to see they both looked to be in pain, judging from the way they grimaced every few seconds, or rubbed the spot where he had hit them. "Look at that armor," Naruto murmured to himself. "I feel like I've stepped into some kind of fantasy, medieval anime or something. Man, the author must have been smoking some serious shit to cook up this guy." "Zaston!" exclaimed Lala in surprise. The man looked at Naruto, who simply glared back in his crouched down position. "Move aside, Earthling. This has nothing to do with you. You don't want to get involved in our affairs." "Oh, I don't know about that," Naruto replied nonchalantly. It was in complete contrast with his face, which held one of those, if looks could kill, expressions. "I've been getting pretty bored recently. Who knows, maybe a little excitement will help get the blood pumping. Besides, I already promised myself that I would help Lala in any way I can. That includes protecting her from you people." The man, Zaston, Lala had called him, raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know what's going on here, Earthling. I'll only give you one more warning. Stand aside." "Then why don't you fill me in?" Naruto said. He moved, carefully placing himself directly between Lala and Zaston and his two thugs. "Lala-sama has run away from home," Zaston told him. "This is the 6th time she's done so. Now, stand aside. It's time for her to return home." "I'm not going," Lala shouted. "Successor or not, I'm sick and tired of having to sit through arranged marriage meetings every day. What you want doesn't matter. This is your father's wish. Now come here. We're going home." "I don't think so," Naruto said. He absently lamented not thinking about grabbing his weapon scrolls. As thing where he would have to rely on hand-to-hand combat. He briefly thought about using jutsu, but if these men really were just trying to bring her home, then killing them was out of the question. "You want her, then you'll have to come through me." Zaston eyed the blonde for a few seconds, noting the fierce and warrior-like expression. "Very well," he said at last, pulling out what looked like the hilt of a sword from his waist. Naruto had to hold in his surprise when the hilt ignited in a flash of green light. He took another moment to curse, wishing he had brought the Ryan no Ken to combat this new energy sword. "I will not be held accountable if you die." Naruto snorted. "You don't honestly think it'll be that easy to kill, do you? Looks like I need to teach you a lesson in manners." "Naruto-kun," Lala said, tugging on his shirt. "Don't worry, Lala," Naruto said without taking his eyes off Zaston. "I have no intention of letting them near you." "That's not what I wanted to talk about," Lala said. "You don't have to fight. Please let me deal with this." Hearing her words, the blonde spared his pink-haired companion a glance. "How? Like this?" Lala said as she took out what Naruto at first thought was a mobile phone from somewhere. He had long stopped trying to figure out how each girl seemed to have their own pocket space for housing random items. "Transfer. Go-go vacuum-kun." A bright purple cone of light shot out from what was decidedly not a phone. Several feet in the air above them, orange matter materialized in the air. The strange substance coagulated together, forming a shape which soon took a more solid appearance. It looked like some kind of metal octopus, and Naruto recognized it as one of Lala's many inventions just from that simple observation. "Oh crap, it's one of Lala-sama's inventions," shouted one of the thugs. Said invention turned around, showing them a pair of glowing yellow eyes and a tube-like mouth. Several metal panels slid apart to reveal a hole in the mouth. "Take this, suck them up," shouted Lala. Following its creator's instructions, the metal monstrosity began sucking up everything in sight with its hose-like mouth. The air seemed to swirl in a cone shape that expanded outwards the further it got from the robot, sucking in everything from dirt to trees to the people Lala had targeted. It seemed to have some trouble with Zaston's armor, as the man got stuck with his feet sticking out of the thing's mouth, kicking and wiggling in an attempt to get out. However, soon enough the armored man was sucked inside of the robot. Naruto sighed, thinking the excitement had ended for the day. This changed when he noticed the creature was still sucking up everything in sight, including signposts, trees, the playground equipment. It even tried to consume him. Thankfully, a small application of chakra to his feet helped ground him, but if the way the gravel was sliding forward, the ground itself wouldn't hold for long. "Lala!" he shouted, looking at the girl as she floated several feet above the robot. "Turn this thing off." Lala placed a hand under her chin and adopted a thoughtful pose. "Is something wrong, Lala-sama?" asked Peak. "This thing, how do I turn it off?" "What?" shouted Naruto in disbelief. "You mean to tell me you created this thing but don't know how to turn it off?" Lala looked over at Naruto and laughed as a sheepish expression crossed her face. "Well, I made this so long ago that I no longer remember how to shut it off." Naruto groaned. "Then I guess I need to take it out. But how to that when there are people inside is the question." Whatever he decided, Naruto knew it would have to be quick. He could feel the ground giving way under him. It wouldn't be long now before he was sucked into that thing as well. "Alright, here we go," Naruto shouted as he began doing something he hadn't done in several hundred years. His hands sped through a series of seals, their movements a little rusty and slow but still faster than any other human alive could possibly accomplish. He ended them on a monkey seal. Raiden. Raikyu. A large ball of sparking lightning generated directly in front of Naruto. Its form wavering as lightning arched in and out of the jutsu. Before long it solidified, becoming a bright blue ball of lightning, which was soon launched at the out-of-control robot. It struck the metal creation right between the eyes, exploding on contact. Rather than release a large gout of flame, sparks of electricity coursed over the thing's metal hull. The robot shuddered and spasmed as its small explosions took place on certain areas like the exhaust vents, which soon began smoking. Its tails flailed wildly for several seconds in what could almost be construed as pain, were it not for the fact that the thing was not alive. It released one final spasm before its eyes dimmed and it fell to the floor with a loud crash. "Ha! Phew!" Naruto said, whistling and sighing at the same time. He stood up on his toes and stretched his hands above his head. "It's been a long time since I've been forced to pull out any jutsu. I'm almost surprised I still remember the hand seals." "Naruto-kun, huh?" Naruto turned around to see Lala float down next to him, her feet daintily touching the ground. She rushed over to him, stopping when she got directly in front of him. "That was so cool," she started, giving him a big smile. "I didn't know Earthlings were able to use any kind of magic." "They can't," Naruto admitted. "I just happen to be a special case. No other Earthling would be able to do something like what I did." "Ah, sugoi." Naruto scratched the back of his head with a sheepish expression. Hearing someone praise him in such an odd voice was nice, but for some reason he felt immensely embarrassed. Just as he opened his mouth in an effort to say something cool, his eyes widened as he noticed the destruction that Lala's machine had caused. It looked like a war zone. Everywhere he looked were large gouts where trees or playground structures had been ripped out of the ground. There was quite literally nothing left of the playground. As he stared at the scene of devastation, Naruto had just one thing to say. "I am so not paying for this." After leaving the park, Naruto took back to his house and made another pot of tea for him and Lala to discuss their situation, only now with a slightly beaten Zaston sitting at the table as well. "So if I'm right, Lala is a princess of 3 from the king of her planet Deviluk. Since the king has no sons, it's up to Lala to find the next in line to the throne by making her pick a husband from a choice of many suitors across the galaxy. Am I right so far?" Naruto asked the two at the table, Lala happily sipping her tea again and Zaston enjoying the new taste sensation. "Indeed, you are correct so far, Uzumaki-san," Zaston confirmed, taking a bit of a rice cracker that Naruto had put out for him and Lala. "Right, now Lala has been having these arranged marriage meetings for some time and she clearly doesn't like them. As such, she has run away 5 times unsuccessfully and her recent attempt brought her to Earth. Obvious once she arrived, the other guards arrived and met me, enough said about that." Naruto tilted his head, remembering the council meetings he had been to since he was part of the community and as such was required to attend, even if it was just sending a cage bunshin to listen and ask questions. I used my invention to escape and I ended up in your bathtub, Naruto-kun, before you saved me from all those guys." "Thanks again," Lala said happily, making Naruto smile at her. For some reason making her happy seemed to give him a bit of joy. It's fine, Lala, but I feel the need to ask what happens now. You don't know anyone on this planet and you don't want to go back to your own planet, and I won't let you do something you don't want since I promised to help you? Naruto questioned the two aliens. I'm afraid there's not much you can do, Uzumaki-san. If the king finds out that someone is preventing his daughter from being returned home, he may very well destroy this planet once he has retrieved her. The king is very protective of Lala-sama, Zaston said, remembering the numerous planets King Gid had blown up in his time as king. Don't worry, I know how I can stay here and not make Oto-sama blow up the planet. Lala proclaimed, holding up her finger. How? Both Naruto and Zaston asked the princess. Well, Oto-sama says I have to have those marriage interviews until I find someone to marry. And since I can't just stay here without getting married, I can just marry Naruto-kun since he offered to help. She explained her solution to the two, only to be met with a jaw-dropped expression from Zaston and a sigh from Naruto. Lala, I can't just marry you. There are a lot of complicated matters when choosing to marry someone you barely know. The most obvious being I don't love you, Naruto said in a polite tone. Not to mention the fact I'm probably old enough to be your great-grandfather and still live long enough to outlive you. He then thought a little sadly. But Naruto-kun, you're so kind and really strong. Oto-sama would love you as a son-in-law. Can you please consider it? She asked with big eyes and a whimpering lip. It was quite possibly her greatest invention next to Peak. Naruto tried to resist the look, but the immensely cute and beautiful girl that was in need of help struck at his heart and he let out another sigh in defeat. He would like to deny it, but the adorable look on Lala's face seemed to somehow bypass his mental barriers. Truly, her puppy dog look was a deadly weapon. No. Naruto crossed his arms, turning his head so he couldn't see her face. But Naruto-kun, you're perfect and so nice. Please let me stay and marry me. Lala moved round to look Naruto in the face, who kept turning his head away. No, he repeated, still continuing his defensive strategy. Zaston, while watching, was a little impressed that Naruto was resisting her look, as he had been on the receiving end of it so many times and had buckled every time as well. Why not? She grabbed his shoulders to stop him, averting her eyes. It would never work, was Naruto answered flatly. Plus we know next to nothing about each other. But we could if I stay here with you. Not happening, he replied to her as she began upping the level by having her lip quiver and tears threatening to drip. Please, I don't want to go back to all those meetings. They all just stare at me and don't ask me anything about what I like. All they want is the chance to be the king after my Oto-sama. Naruto-kun, please let me stay, she said, holding his hands and looking straight into his face. The two stared into each other's eyes until Naruto felt sympathy for her, hearing her plea. He sighed, thinking he'd regret this later. Lala, I'll make you a deal. I would like to request a probationary period for an undisclosed amount of time, in which time you have to convince me that you really want to actually be with me and are not just using me to avoid more marriage interviews. In return, I will let you and any of your family stay if need be and help you get settled in. Your father can set the time limit for the probation. How does that sound? Naruto said, laying down his offer to the princess. He wanted to flat out refuse her, but seeing her face and knowing she'd only be unhappy with so many men from all over asking for her hand, people who may not even love her, made him rethink his plan. His offer gave Lala the chance to get to know him, in which time she could learn the truth and see that the relationship wouldn't work out and both would part ways on respectable terms. But another part of him actually wanted to see how far the girl would go in her efforts to make him believe she had feelings for him and not just her using him to escape the marriage meetings. It'd only be hard when he told her his age and condition. So all I have to do to prove that I can be your bride is love you lots and show you that I'm not just using you to escape from Oto-sama's interviews? Naruto nodded to her question. Okay then, Zaston, call Oto-sama and tell him I found someone to be my husband and that I'm staying with him here on Earth. Lala said as Zaston picked up his jaw from the floor and nodded, dumbly, heading outside to call for his ship so he could return to the atmosphere and his actual ship to call the king from across the galaxy. I will, but Uzumaki-san, please become aware that this action will have its consequences to your life. But seeing how you bested my men, perhaps you will actually be capable of defending yourself. He stepped outside, remembering how he had both stopped his men from detaining Lala and stopping her malfunctioning invention with ease. The blonde had stopped it much more easily than he ever had. Oh, how he wished never to remember the times when his days were full of tears at the hands of the princess's inventions. I figured. A marriage between powerful people has its fair share of troubles. But please, since we may be seeing each other regularly, call me Naruto. Uzumaki makes me feel old. Naruto said, ignoring the irony of his own statement as Zaston gave a small smirk. Very well, Naruto-san. I hope we may have a proper duel next time to see how you measure up to the strongest swordsman on Deviluk. He said as a beam teleported him up to his ship that would take him to his main ship for long-distance communications. Planet's strongest swordsman. A duel with Zaston might be fun. Naruto chuckled to himself as he made his way to the ramen pantry again to take out a few cups. Do you want some ramen, Lala? He asked the girl, who nodded. Yes please, Naruto-kun, I'd like to try some. Lala replied as he picked out a classic miso ramen for her and put it into the microwave. Do you need anything, Peek? He asked the costume robot, still maintaining Lala's dress form. She probably gonna need some clothes if she's gonna stay here. At least it's an excuse to use the money I have for a change instead of all of it going on my ramen. He thought to himself. I am fine, Naruto-san. I do not require food since I run on electricity, but thank you for asking. Peek replied as Naruto refilled Lala's empty cup for her. Naruto-san, do you live in this house on your own? Peek asked. Naruto gave a small shrug. Yeah, I do, but it doesn't bother me really. You get used to it after a while, and I have some friends living next door who I eat with during the week. Plus there's my garden too, he said, gesturing with his head to the glass door leading to the back of the house. You like gardening, Naruto-kun? Lala questioned as Naruto placed the cooked ramen in front of her and she gave thanks before snapping her chopsticks apart and digging in. I've always had a green thumb, have a look if you want. My garden is something I take joy in caring for. Naruto took his first cup of ramen and beginning to slurp on the noodles as he explained himself. That's cool, my sister loves plants as well. Lala said as she quickly finished her noodles and was given another since she still looked hungry. Lala nodded thankfully as she accepted her next cup. Tilda, what are we doing tomorrow, Naruto-kun? The girl asked, curious. Well, I have school to go to, but if you're going to be living here, I guess we could see if you could join the school as well. Although that's only if you want to, Lala, he said to her. He didn't want to just leave her at home while he went to school, plus she might make some friends with some of the other girls at school. Not to mention the fact that the principal was a massive pervert would make getting her admitted into the school no trouble at all. Oh, what school? Lala asked, not knowing what on earth school was. Understandable, seeing as how she was mostly tutored and a genius as well, so Naruto could see that he would need to teach Lala a number of different things since she was new to Earth. School is a place kids go to learn different skills and subjects so they can get qualifications. I guess being a princess school really isn't something you'd go to. Naruto said as he heard the agreeing of Peek. Lala-sama has been tutored like her sisters from a young age, but since Lala-sama created me, it's easy to see her level of intellect. Peek said in proud tone. Yeah, but those lessons with the tutors were really boring. There was never anyone to even talk to besides my sisters and Peek after I invented her. Lala said, pouting, making her look like an adorable puppy to Naruto, whose instincts were just telling him to just give her a hug. The school I go to is a little boring, but there's lots of other things you can do, like the sports clubs. You can also make friends with some of your classmates if you want. My neighbor is in the same class as me, so I might be able to introduce you tomorrow, Lala. Naruto told her as her mood instantly changed and her smile was back on her face, as it should be for a nice girl like Lala. Okay dokie, Naruto-kun. But where am I sleeping tonight? She asked as both finished their ramen and threw the cups into the trash, and Naruto stood up and gestured for her to follow him. The two went up the stairs and Naruto pointed to the door on the left of the stairs. That's my spare room for guests, Lala. You can stay there for the night. You can decorate it later, but looking at the time now, we need to get some sleep if you want to see what school is like, okay? He said to her, looking at his watch. Thank you, Naruto-kun, said Lala as she wrapped her arms around Naruto for another hug, surprising him to be physically intimate with him in any fashion. It was kind of nice getting a hug from a sweet girl like Lala, and his inner pervert was getting another feel of her generous body. He'd ignore those feelings right now though. Why, you're welcome, Lala. Now go get some sleep and I'll see you in the morning, said Naruto as he went into his room and began changing into his night clothes, and Lala entered hers to get some sleep, although whether she stayed in that bed was a question. Above the atmosphere, Zaston and his men were back aboard their own ship, and Zaston had activated the communication systems to contact his king for the report of the situation. "My king, I bring word of your daughter Lala-sama, and news on her current state," Zaston informed as the silhouette of the king came up on the screen. "Well, explain then, Zaston," said the deep voice of Gid, his arms crossing on the screen, waiting for the report on his eldest. The fact that she wasn't next to Zaston made him curious. Gid-sama. We followed Lala-sama after she ran away, again. In our pursuit we followed her to the Sol system and the third planet named Earth. She used one of her inventions to escape from her pod. Thankfully we were able to track her robot peak to her location," Zaston reported, but was sweating slightly about the next part of the report. "What happened, Zaston? If you found her, then why isn't she next to you speaking with me?" The king asked, his tail swishing about almost like a predator does once it's found its prey. "Why yes, well Gid-sama. Lala-sama while on the planet came into contact with a human. A human who was able to best my men and also able to stop Lala-sama's invention when it malfunctioned. The young man offered his help to the princess, and as such she has decided that he will be her fiancé," Zaston said, his voice going quieter as he finished. "What?" Gid shouted in shock and slight anger of his daughter's actions. "A human was able to beat your men and stop my daughter's inventions. Send me the information you have on him as well as the camera feed from your ship," the king demanded his knight, who quickly typed away on the computer screen, sending him Naruto's profile and the video of him taking down Lala's invention. Gid read to profile of Naruto and was mildly amused that it appeared as if Lala had selected the strongest male in his school, having multiple fighting tournaments under his belt. However, when he looked up age, the computer was unable to give a reading on it, which confused him. On the other hand, seeing Naruto use his ninjutsu made him smirk. He recognized the power being used to create that attack. Another user of that power has emerged. Hee hee ha 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 ha. The king laughed like a madman, seeing the power coming from Naruto and seeing as it was similar to another great power in the universe. "Zaston, tell me, what do you make of this Uzumaki Naruto?" he asked. "Gid-sama, Naruto-san seems to be a very respectable and powerful man, but also intelligent. When Lala-sama suggested marrying him, he requested a probationary period for the engagement that you would set. It appears he doesn't want her throwing her life away, so has given her the chance to actually grow feelings for him or find someone else. He also is very mature about the whole thing and has said if any of Lala-sama's family needs it they can stay at his home," Zaston said as Gid nodded in acknowledgement. "I see. Uzumaki Naruto. Let us see if my daughter has found someone who is worthy of becoming my heir." Zaston began recording a message for Uzumaki telling that I approve of his plan. Gid said as Zaston nodded and typed at his screen to take the message. "To think the universe has another user of that power. I wonder if he could match my power," Gid thought in excitement, hoping that this Naruto would give him a descent challenge. Morning soon came over the horizon, bringing a bright ray light through Naruto's window, waking him from his slumber. "Stupid son," he muttered, trying to move his arms but found that one seemed to be trapped under something, but the hand felt something soft under it. Drawing the covers back, he found a very naked and Lala sleeping in his bed, her face holding a peaceful expression. "How did she sneak into my bed? No one has been able to even come close to doing that in centuries," he muttered to himself in confusion, wondering how the alien girl had managed it. His mind then clocked that Lala was indeed naked, and his eyes drifted down to her body once more, taking in the sights of her body. Jiraiya would give her 100 points given the chance due to the soft silk skin, bountiful bosom, long hair and a personality you could not help but love. Perfect material for Icha no doubt. Thankfully Naruto in his maturity had learned that shouting would get him nowhere, so gently rocked the girl awake with his free arm and was forever thankful he wore clothes to sleep. "Lala, wake up," Naruto said softly as the girl's eyes fluttered open before she smiled up at Blonde and rose up, freeing his arm and giving her arms a stretch, her tail stretching as well, adding to her cute factor. "Good morning Naruto-kun," she smiled at him as Naruto had let out a small sigh. "Lala, I seem to remember you going to bed in another room. Why is it you are now in mine?" "No, wait, scratch that. Why are you in my bed naked?" asked Naruto. Never in his 3,000 years of life had he been in a situation like this. Not even during the years of traveling with Jiraiya and since the man took him to brothels for collecting information that was saying something. He wondered if he should be grateful for the new experience. "Well, you're my fiancé now, so it's only natural that I sleep in your bed, right?" She replied as Naruto could see her logic and, given her complete disregard for personal modesty, was probably taught this was how couples act by her parents. That was the only way he could explain her reasoning in her current state. "I may be your fiancé Lala, but I'm not sure we're close enough for that. I mean, I only met you last night, so me sleeping in the same bed as you might not be the best right now," he said, but Lala just kept smiling. "Then I'll just get close to you as soon as possible so you'll be comfortable with this," she said to him, and Naruto could tell she probably wasn't going to budge on the subject. He just had to set up measures so she wouldn't be able to sneak into his room again. He got out of bed and ruffled his hair about and tying off the end in a low ponytail with a white ribbon. "Fine, why don't you get washed and dressed? We have school this morning. I'll make you some breakfast. Anything you want?" he asked, collecting his clothes from his drawers. I don't know what food Earth has beside the yummy ramen last night, Naruto-kun. I'll trust you to make something yummy if that's alright," she said, smiling her infectious smile, which got Naruto to smile as well. The fact that this girl liked ramen just caused his smile to be all the wider. "Okay, I'll fix us something before we head out. We'll probably be able to time it so we can walk down with a friend of mine," Naruto said, wondering how he'd explain his situation to Rito and Mikan. Most likely tell them the truth and hope for the best. Heading downstairs and dressing himself in a flash that would make his father proud, Naruto set about making some French toast and some pancakes for Lala. Although he did have the ramen pantry, he did have other food in his house, and he after many years had discovered the joys of cooking from other countries. As such, his kitchen was filled with quite a few cookbooks from the current generation's chefs alongside his own personal one, which had over 100 different dishes from across the world. Ramen was just simply the best dish of all in his opinion. It was of course the food of the gods that needed only a few alterations for the world and with Lala the universe to see the truth of this fact. It wasn't long before Lala came downstairs in her dress form, since they'd need to pick up her uniform when they got to the school and convince the perverted principal to let her attend. When Lala saw the food, a look of joy appeared on Lala's face. It was a look Naruto would come to enjoy, as every cook loves it when your food brings happiness to those who eat it. It was something one Choji Akamichi had once told him. Of joy on her face was something Naruto would enjoy, as every cook loves it when your food brings the feeling of happiness to those who will eat it. "Wow, Naruto-kun, all this delicious looking food for us?" she asked as Naruto gave a small chuckle at her odd state and nodded to her question, at which she gave a small jump for joy. "Okay, calm down Lala. Now eat up before we have to go and catch Rito before he leaves, unless his date went better than expected and ended up staying up late with Haruna," Naruto muttered, tapping his chopsticks to his chin before shaking his head. "Nah, he's too innocent, plus Mikan-chan wouldn't stop teasing him once he made it home." Knowing how Rito's little sister would take her brother finally getting a girlfriend, with immense joy at the chance to tease him endlessly. "Who are you talking about, Naruto-kun?" the pink-haired princess asked, her mouth half chewing on a piece of toast. "Just some friends you'll be meeting, Lala. I think you'll get on fine with Rito and Mikan-chan, they're very friendly and reliable," Naruto told her as she nodded, re-engaging her meal. Finishing their breakfast, Naruto fixed them both some lunch and handed it to Lala, having given her a bag to carry things in if needed. Stepping outside the door, the two saw that it was a clear day in the sky with the sun shining and barely any clouds. Looking to his right, Naruto noticed that Rito was leaving the house looking very happy with himself, as he should, considering the good day yesterday. "Yo Rito, good morning." Naruto waved over to the boy, as did Lala. The orange-haired youth turned to see his neighbor standing to a pretty pink-haired girl. "Good morning Naruto, who's that?" Rito asked, pointing to Lala with slight curiosity. Naruto rarely if ever left his house with a girl, at least from what he had seen. Did that mean she had spent the night? "This is Lala, she moved in with me last night after I helped her out with some family problems." Naruto explained a little of what happened to a degree, leaving out any factors of extraterrestrials. "So your name is Lala, nice to meet you, I'm Yuki Rito." Rito's greeting was polite and gave a small bow of the head. "Nice to meet you too Rito, I hope we can be friends while I'm here." It's nice to know one of my fiancé's friends here when I just moved. Rito's eyes went wide hearing that she was Naruto's fiancé, seeing as how he never really displayed any intention of committed to a relationship. Perhaps this was the reason why. Oh Naruto, you're getting married, congratulations. Rito bowed his head as Naruto sighed at his action. Rito, don't embarrasses yourself in front of Lala. Just embarrasses yourself in front of your girlfriend, seeing as how she'd probably find it funny. And by the way, what time did you get home last night? I hope you weren't up all night kissing Haruna. The chuckle Naruto gave made Rito go red, of forced steam out of his ears at the mental picture created by his somewhat older brother. Naruto, don't say things like that, we haven't even been out on our first date yet. I can barely even think about KK kiss. The boy stuttered about with his words as Naruto took a small amount of pleasure in teasing him. Alright, I'll stop, for now at least. Let's head to school. I still need to get Lala accepted into the school when we get there. That should take what, 30 seconds with the principal. Rito groaned, knowing what Naruto was talking about with their school principal. More like 20, how did he get that position again despite the fact he's a raging pervert? This had been a question on both male and female student in the school, and there were many theories as to how, but nothing concrete as of yet. That he is, still, there's nothing we can do about right now but prank the hell out of him every chance we get. That's my policy when it comes to perverts, always has been, always will be. Rito just gave a nod, inwardly pleased that he wasn't a pervert. There were many a horror story of the pranks his blonde friend would pull on people with problems of perversion. Some were so horrible that the male population vowed to never speak of them again. On a side note, Sarayama shuddered every time someone mentioned male thongs, super glue, and a rubber duck. The walk to school was fairly quiet, although Lala did manage to draw the eyes of every boy on the way, just as Naruto drew the eyes of the girls. As such, both of them received glares of jealousy from their respective gender. Naruto for being next to the super hot cosplayer with unique hair, and Lala for seemingly snagging the guy that every girl in school was after, if the way she was latched onto his arm, much to his protest, was anything to go by. On that note, he had discovered that Lala was ridiculously strong, as in Ba-chan level of strength. He had yet to determine whether this was a good or bad thing, however. Wow, check out the cosplay girl. So why and such beautiful. How come she's hanging off Uzumaki though? Yeah, how come she gets to do that? Naruto-sama never lets us do that. Ooh, I'm really jealous of this chick now. These were just some of the comments that Naruto heard as he walked into the school, his talent for ignoring the masses being quite useful right now. Once through the gates, he walked and exchanged his shoes for his slippers, Lala letting his arm go for a moment only to jump on his back. Honestly, she has more energy than most people I've known in my life. Well, at least she isn't shouting to the skies about the flames of youth. The world doesn't need another Lee and Guy's sunset genjutsu. These thoughts passed through Naruto's head as he carried Lala on his back quickly through the halls and to the principal's office, which he opened up, revealing the short chubby principal who was sadly reading a dirty magazine at his desk. Oi principal, I have a girl who wants to enroll here. Naruto said, getting the man to look up at the smiling face of Lala over Naruto's shoulder. Oh, you're cute. You're in, he said as Naruto face palmed at the man, allowing Lala to enroll in less than 5 seconds after seeing her. Do you need a uniform? Cuss, I'll need to take measurements to make it fit a young girl like you, he said as Naruto could be heard groaning at the man's behavior. I'll take her to Mikado-sensei, principal, since she will need to take some information on her. I'll get her to send you the files for records later. The blonde paused. Then, and put some pants on for pity's sake, Naruto said as the man had walked out from his desk, showing that while his torso was dressed, he was only clad in his thankfully loose stripped boxers. Ah yes, Mikado-sensei would be best. Just make sure that the new girl looks cute for when I'm passing through the halls. Okay tilde. I'll get a teacher to sort out your schedule, but for now you'll be in Naruto-kun's class. The man winked at Naruto, making him shiver. Principal, Naruto said in a mild manner, a pleasant smile on his face as if he were talking about the weather. Need I remind you that acting like a pervert will not only get your ass pranked, but that you could also get fired, or even arrested for this type of behavior? Despite the blonde's threat and the manner in which he spoke, the principal just smiled and gestured for the two of them to leave so he could get back to looking at pictures of naked, reading his magazine in peace. Lala slipped off Naruto's back as they left the office with Naruto releasing a breath. "Nay Naruto-kun, how come the principal was so funny?" asked the innocent voice of Lala. Because apparently perverts can be placed in a highly respected position even though most of their acts would have gotten them jailed long ago. "Anyway, try to avoid that man at all times when you see him, okay Lala," he advised her as she nodded smiling. "Now Mikado-sensei is the school doctor and when we get to her office she'll take your measurements and sort you out with a uniform." The school board agreed that she was the best to do it after several hundred complaints. The memory of that whole incident was fresh in his mind as he had helped out several girls when the principal chased them through the halls with measuring tape. The simplicity of leaning your leg out was something to note down when wondering how to trip someone up. "After that you'll have to ask her where my class is if you're joining mine. Now, follow me please Lala." Naruto began leading Lala down the hall as students were, thankfully, by now entering their classrooms. "Oi Mikado-sensei, I have a new student for you. The principal had just enrolled her," Naruto called, opening the door to find the smirking face of Ryoko Mikado, the school doctor and love of a few of the male population of the school for her killer looks and large chest which was bigger than Lala's. The brunette had a good friendship with Naruto, and the two chatted fairly often when he wanted some quiet time away from the annoying male students after his neck. He usually just scared them off with a death glare, but at times he couldn't be bothered doing it, so just found a nice quiet place, and Mikado's office was a quiet place. Mikado herself found Naruto fun to talk to as he wasn't a sputtering teenage male like the rest of the school and also didn't spend most of the time ogling her chest despite the fact that her top did expose a lot of cleavage. As a result, she liked to tease Naruto to try and get a regular male reaction out of him, but his will seemed unbreakable so far in her attempts to get the boy flustered. Although there was also something about Mikado that made it easier for Naruto to talk to, like she was keeping a secret of her own like the many he already had. "Ah Naruto-kun, good morning, so is this our new student then?" she cute, said Mikado looking at Lala with a smile. "Hi, my name is Lala Deviluk. Nice to meet you Mikado-sensei." Lala greeted with a small bow as Mikado giggled a little at the polite girl. "Nice to meet you too Lala-chan. I take you need a uniform?" Lala nodded and Mikado got up from her chair to retrieve her measurement tape. "Well, please get unchanged behind the blind there and we'll begin. Feel free to stay and watch Naruto-kun. I doubt you'll get many chances to see a body like Lala-chan's here up close," she said, only to get a deadpanned expression from the blonde. "You'd like to think that, wouldn't you? Sadly, Lala and I have ended up in a situation thanks to her family background. Feel free to tell her, Lala. I've got to head to class, please give her directions Mikado-sensei," Naruto said, closing the door behind him as Mikado shook her head as he went. "That boy needs someone in his life besides those fangirls," she muttered, turning back to Lala, who had asked Peak to transform into a pair of panties and bra so she could get measured, not bothering to hide her tail, which Mikado got a good look at before she began measuring the girl. Naruto's walk to class was met with a large number of whispers about him and the new girl. He was slightly annoyed, but managed to ignore it, until he heard a very loud voice coming down the corridor towards him. "Naruto!" shouted the voice of Kenichi Sarayama, a friend of his and Rito. The boy was Rito's best friend, but was slightly perverted and tended to ogle a few of the girls during gym class. He and Naruto hit it off rather well, with Naruto thinking that the boy reminded him of old Sarutobi from Konoha. He guessed it was the Saru in his name, which he had nicknamed him, but also the fact the boy was a pervert like the old man was. As he ran to Naruto, the blonde held out his arm and clothes-lined, Ichigo style, the boy knocking the wind out of him. "Asu, Saru," Naruto greeted with Kenichi's nickname he had given him. "What's up?" he asked the boy currently nursing his sore chest, checking for broken ribs. "I heard you were seen with a white pink-haired chick this morning. And a cosplayer too. How did you score her? The rumors say she had big boobs and a really cute face. Tell me, tell me, tell me," the boy demanded, grasping at Naruto's leg. "Saru, you're in my space," Naruto said in a deadpan tone, making the boy back up as Naruto liked his personal space when it came to men. Girls were fine, but with all the envy he got off the males, he insisted that any and all male students respect his personal space. "Oh right, sorry, forgot about that Naruto. Anywho, what's the deal with you and the hot girl?" he asked, curious, as were a few of the others around, all ears turned to listen in. "She's a new student and recently moved here. But her family is setting something up between us which she is probably going to blurt out when she comes to class. Now, come on, I don't want to be late, Naruto said, opening the door and walking over to his seat, but seeing that Rito and Haruna were nervously chatting with each other, no doubt over events the previous night. As Naruto smiled, his body moved on instinct and leaned to the side as a human-sized rocket shot past him. Looking over, he saw Riza, a friend of Haruna who often attempted to tackle him in order to grope him like she did many girls. When they first met, she had immediately groped him, and as such Naruto quickly learned to always suspect the girl once Haruna apologized for her, saying it was normal for her to do it, before getting groped herself. Riza along with her friend Mio took joy in teasing many girls around the school, but when they met Naruto, they met their only male target for teasing, since no one saw Naruto blush in school or at all really. They had made it a life mission to get him flustered like Mikado had with her fairly busty figure. She had short brown hair and her developed figure earned a bit of envy from other girls, although they probably feared being groped by her more than their envy. She was usually seen with her best friend Mio, who wore glasses and had black hair tied in 2 pigtails and had a more petite body than her friend, but still had the same groping habits as Riza. "Riza, you know you can't catch me, right?" he asked down to the floored girl, who got to her feet and pouted at the blonde. "Mo, why do you keep dodging, Naruto-kun? All I want is to caress those Adonis-like muscles you have and run my hands through those soft blonde locks. What's so wrong with that?" she asked as Naruto just stared at her smirking face before he moved to the side, causing Mio to collide with Riza, knocking her to the floor again as her friend had tried to grab Naruto while distracted by Riza. "It's because I don't want to be molested by 2 girls that have an unnatural obsession with grabbing people and embarrassing them. But anyway, good morning to the pair of you," he greeted politely as both got to their feet and wiped the dirt from their skirts. "Oh come on, Naruto-kun. I'll let you see something nice if you let us admire that perfect body of yours," said Riza, lifting her skirt ever so lightly, making many of the males in the class focus their eye in hopes of seeing her panties. Sadly for them, Naruto still didn't like perverts, so nailed them all in the head fast with some piece of eraser he kept cut up and ready for firing from his pocket. He had to buy a lot of erasers while he was at school as a result of this, but knocking down perverts gave him a nice sense of nostalgia since he used to do it to Jiraiya. The old pervert may have been annoying, but he was a great man, and Naruto's fondest memories were of the years they trained and of how he got him in trouble by exposing him when researching. "Riza, you can't bribe me like that, and if you continue I think a few people might get concussions." He gestured his head over to the boys currently nursing their heads from the unseen blow that happened so fast. "Only because you're such a gentleman, Naruto-kun. Now tell us what the deal is with that girl you were walking through halls with and to school with," said Mio, trying her puppy dog eye look at Naruto. Sadly, she wasn't Lala, so her version he was able to resist perfectly, so he decided to use the old skill of replacement. "You'll learn later maybe, but Rito finally asked Haruna-chan out, you know?" he said as both girls blinked, as did Kenichi, and turned to see the two still chatting, albeit nervously. Seeing the sight, Riza and Mio got very dark gleams in their eyes and their fingers twitched at a chance to tease the young Rito and their friend Haruna. Kenichi just smiled for his best friend finally asking the girl he was crushing on, and turned to Naruto. "Helped him out, didn't you?" he stated, more than asked, knowing Naruto tended to do various things to help out others. "Yeah, got tired of watching him fail, and they suit each other in a strange way. Besides, it may help with his confidence and he deserves to be happy like most people here," said Naruto as he took his seat and put his bag under his desk. Kenichi though thought he saw something in Naruto's eye as he said this, but wasn't sure it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Naruto then watched as Riza got behind Haruna and grabbed her bosom, making Haruna squeak in shock and surprise and Rito go completely red in the face before Mio joined in on the groping Haruna. Naruto just chuckled at the scene, feeling this will probably be happening a lot over the next few weeks. The day's lessons were fairly quiet, surprising Naruto, who thought that Lala would have returned by this point and caused a huge fuss for him and a large amount of trouble from the male students again. "Then again, I left her with Mikado, so she'll be alright. She's probably as level-headed as Mike and Chan, if not a little flirtatious. Meh, I'll enjoy my peace while it lasts and hope that those girls from yesterday have forgotten about those dates," Naruto thought optimistically, due to the issue around Lala now and how girls, especially fangirls, can become territorial. I know I promised, but the situation with Lala might trump that, and with Zaston saying how her father has blown up several planets, it might be best for me to use some good old clones or memory manipulation. So glad I learned to do a little of that, made things easier in England. Naruto was referring to the fact that he altered several people's minds to make them believe he had died so he could get away from the horny widow. Wonder what I should have for lunch? Naruto wondered aloud, although did get an answer from the side of him. You can always have me if I get a taste of you? Riza offered before she got squirted in the face by Naruto holding a squeeze bottle. Please don't continue down that road. I'd hate to have to use this more often, Riza, said Naruto, placing the bottle back under his desk and into his bag. One day, Naruto-kun, just you wait and I know you'll come to accept it just like all the others, Riza said, placing her hand on her chin after wiping her face. Just like all the other girls who try to get away from your and Mio's hands. I still wonder if she was as bad when you met her or she simply got worse over time with you, Naruto said deadpan to Riza, who shrugged at the question, not really knowing herself. Doesn't matter at this point. Anyways, are you joining us for lunch? Riza asked, then saw his look and decided to elaborate. Me and Mio-chan are still teasing the new couple. Sure, why not? I need a good laugh, he muttered, getting his lunch and standing up looking out the window. He then did a double take, spotting something in the corner of his eye. Change of plans, something just came up, Riza. I'll join you in a bit, he said, moving to the door. Just don't take too long, Naruto-kun tilde, she sang as he gave a small wave in acknowledgement, leaving the room. Once outside the room, he closed the door and looked both ways across the hall, before leaving with the Shunshin no Jutsu to quickly get to the outside of the school and behind Zaston. Oi, Zaston, he called, making the man jump and looked round to see Naruto standing behind him with his hands in his pockets. Wanna explain what you are doing in front of my school? And before you do, follow me, you kinda stand out, Naruto said, leading the man to the trees by the side of the school. Forgive me, Naruto Dono. I didn't mean to cause any problems, but your energy signature was coming from this location and the front gate seemed to be the best option, said Zaston, holding a small item in his hand which he then held out to Naruto. Here, this is from the king. It is the time limit set for your probationary fiancé period plus a small message for you. He pressed a button activating the hologram which displayed a silhouette of a spiky-haired figure. Uzumaki Naruto, when I first heard that you had been chosen as my daughter's husband, I was outraged by her choice of choosing a weak human. However, upon seeing your fight, and the power you used to defeat Lala's bodyguards, I feel that it would only be appropriate if I gave you a chance to marry her. While I would prefer she be married already, I understand your request for a waiting period to see if the relationship can work without having my daughter marry the wrong person. As such, I am giving her and you 6 months to see if you or her can both find it acceptable to be married. However, you must both reciprocate the other's feeling for the marriage to be continued. Gid explained, and Naruto nodded despite the fact it was a message, so he wasn't really agreeing, as more taking in the information. But be aware that other suitors will come looking for you now that an announcement has been made over my daughter's choice of fiancé. They will come after you to prove that they are more worthy of her affection and the chance to become my heir to the throne. Naruto groaned upon hearing this and seeing he now had 6 months of attempted assassins to work with. He never liked assassins, being one himself knew just how bad they could be to your daily life. Add the fact that they weren't from Earth and only made it more of a hassle. This is what Shikamaru always meant by women being nothing but troublesome. Still, he ended up with twin daughters and a son who acted like his mother. Poor soul, he never got to nap again after that, thought Naruto in slight memory of the lazy friend. I will be coming to inspect the situation of your relationship at some point, but you will not be informed of when. However, I will also be there to test this strength of yours as it intrigues me. I want to see if a user of the Rikudo's power is as strong as my great-grandfather's stories. This made Naruto blink slightly, seeing as Lala's father might know about the chakras since he made reference to the creator of all techniques as well as the tailed beasts. Until then, Uzumaki Naruto, I bid you farewell and only ask you allow my servants, Zaston, into your home and look after my daughter. If you don't, you and your planet are in trouble, and good luck handling her personality. Hee. He laughed as the message ended and Naruto placed his hand on his head. This is going to suck, I can tell. Oi Zaston, please tell me you have other clothes beside that? He asked the Deviluk Knight, who rubbed the back of his head a little nervous. I unfortunately do not. My attire is usually that which you see since I am a guard of the royal family of Devilug, he said with pride, and Naruto just sighed hearing him. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a clone of Naruto appeared before it puffed again, leaving an image of Naruto's old friend and teacher Yamato in civilian clothing. Naruto, with a slight bead of sweat from using a quite powerful technique after being out of practice, gave the clone one of his cards. Good thing the world uses chip and pin more, otherwise using a hanged clone might be a little more difficult, he thought, and turned back to Zaston. This clone is going to take you into town and pick out some normal clothes for you. Don't worry about money, as it isn't an issue. And don't complain about not being able to protect your charge without your armor. I have ways to strengthen clothing, and I don't want people asking questions about why a guy wearing armor is living at my house. Zaston just nodded while very impressed at how Naruto had cloned himself and transformed himself seemingly effortlessly. Ah, yes, my thanks Naruto Dono. I take it you'll be able to give advice while we are looking for different clothes that would look respectable for your planet? He asked, thinking it was the right word to use. Yes, also try to keep to yourself and don't tell anyone you're an alien. It would only cause a fuss and possible problems with certain people and groups, Naruto said, with Zaston nodding again, knowing the importance of information to a given population and that Earth was a low-class planet with not a high enough level of technology to have full knowledge of other planets, even with the traffic it seemed to receive from time to time. Very well, Clone-san. Please plead the way and I will see you at the home later, Naruto Dono. Zaston bowed as Naruto waved him off. Just call the clone Yamato, Zaston. And yeah, see you at home, and hopefully looking more normal for Earth at least. With that said, Naruto turned back to the school and, with liberal use of Shunshin, was back inside of the hallway. He stretched out his limbs for a moment, tired from using the jutsu due to how his chakra pathways hadn't been used in a long time. Much like a muscle atrophied from disuse, it seemed his chakra coils would need to be beefed up again. Gonna need to train a little with my techniques if assassins are gonna start coming. I'll need to find a place to practice without people seeing it, Naruto thought, opening the door and walking back into the room and also hitting Riza in the head with a piece of eraser as he spotted her trying to steal his lunch. Riza, do you have to steal my lunch? I take time making those for me to eat, he said as she pouted again, looking cutely at Naruto. But you always make them so good, I just want a bite, that's all, she said, almost whining at being denied. It was a known fact that while Naruto loved ramen and brought some to school on occasion, he could make really good boxed lunches that looked professional. Oddly enough, it was professional standard after being trained by a few people over time in his traveling periods across the world. If you and Mio stop trying to grab me for a couple days, I might let you have a bite or two, he offered to her. This, however, offer caused a conflict for the girl, who began weighing both the options of eating from Naruto's lunch or trying to catch Naruto in her head. 2 days, Riza offered as Naruto picked up a fried egg with his chopsticks. A week, Naruto returned with his own, slowly taking a bite and being quite dramatic about it, almost tempted to fake moan at the taste. This seemed to affect Riza. 3 days. 6 days, better be quick, otherwise I'll finish all this delicious food before you can make a deal, Riza. Naruto smirked as Riza's eye twitched. 5 days, but Mio-chan gets food as well, final offer. She crossed her arms as Naruto tilted his head in thought for a moment. Deal, help yourself Riza, Mio enjoy. Naruto placed his half-full bento box in front of the girl, who smiled, picking up their chopsticks and digging in and taking a bite. After one bite, both now had a blissful expression on their face, and many were wondering just how good the lunches were now. Although, the other girls in class were now mentally checking off, great cook, in their what makes Naruto perfect boyfriend material lists. Not that such a thing needed to added by this point. Naruto, you do know that by doing that she's going to keep asking for food from you in exchange for not groping you? Kenichi asked Naruto, who about to eat from the second level of his lunch. The blonde paused for a moment before shrugging. Meh, there are worse things than cooking for a girl. Besides, it's for a greater good in my case, he said as Kenichi nodded, seeing the logic behind it, even though he'd rather have a pretty girl cook him a nice box lunch instead of the other way round, just to know how it felt. The rest of the day went without much fuss and incident, making Naruto curious about what happened to Lala. After waving the others goodbye to the others, he ran home to check if Lala was there. He did have to look after her after all, and losing her on the first day of the probation period would not look good for him. Opening the door, he found that the hallway had several bags scattered around the floor and they all seemed to be from female clothing stores if Naruto recognized the brands on the sides of the bags. That woman, she didn't. Naruto thought, his mind moving to the slightly mischievous doctor. He opened the door into the front room and found Lala twirling round as she looked at herself in the mirror wearing a pink shirt that exposed a bit of her midriff, white zip-up jacket and sky blue short shorts showing off her legs and firm behind. He felt himself stare for a moment and swore he heard a perverted laughing in his head. "Lala," Naruto said as the girl turned and put on her megawatt smile and ran to him, jumping into him. He caught her as she gave him a big hug. "Welcome home, Naruto-kun," she greeted before stepping back out of the hug. "Lala, where did these clothes come from?" Naruto asked curiously. Mikado-sensei asked about me living here and how I had moved with few clothes, so decided to help me out and took me out shopping for clothes and other things. The stores here are really great, they're different from what we have back home. And the shop people were friendly when helping me get new bras too, like this one. She lifted her shirt to show off her deep red bra that had frills over the edge of it and was indeed well fitted to her bosom. On the other hand, Naruto didn't need to see it, so pulled her hand down and with it her shirt. "Did Mikado-sensei pay for all this?" "I didn't think she was that generous," Naruto muttered, getting a giggle from the kitchen. "Oh, it hurts that you think of me like that, Naruto-kun. I took time to help out your fiancée and get her settled up with her uniform and other school wear along with her new wardrobe. Although, I'm sure you'll be able to pay me back the money, since you did tell me you do have a fair bit of money and you live on your own." Mikado's smirk made Naruto's eye twitch as she was so going to try and tease him over his temporary engagement. "I also recall this tall gentleman who arrived home just a little after we did. Zaston, I think his name was. He had a kind old man helping him buy some clothes. I believe I heard him mumbling something along the lines of thanking Naruto Dono for his generosity." Mikado giggled slightly. "I must admit, Naruto-kun, you certainly are generous. Lala-chan here told me all about how you got engaged to her so she wouldn't have to suffer going through more marriage proposals from the nobles back at her home. This is going to turn into a massive headache over the next few days, I know it. Still, she clearly did help out Lala with her clothes, and me taking Lala shopping would be awkward with our situation and how uncomfortable I am, since she doesn't seem to have nudity taboos around me." Naruto thought to himself, taking a seat as Mikado poured a cup of tea for him. "Thanks, Mikado-sensei. I was going to take Lala out shopping soon, but I guess I don't need to now. But before your mind goes any further into my situation with Lala, I have a message from her father." Lala turned, seeing the mention of her dad. "The time limit for the engagement probationary period is 6 months. In order for the marriage to continue, both of us have to reciprocate the other's feeling. I am also subject to other suitors coming to request a challenge of sorts if they feel I am unworthy of Lala. And other than letting her and her family servant Zaston stay, everything will be fine except when he makes a surprise visit at some point to test me," he said as Lala blinked in surprise hearing the last part. "Oto-sama wants to test you, Naruto-kun, that's strange. But you said we have 6 months, right?" He nodded as she smiled, walking behind him and hugging him from behind the chair. "That'll be plenty of time to get you to fall in love with me and for me to get to know you better," she said as Mikado just smiled at the strange couple, resting her chin on her hand. "You certainly have a way with women, Naruto-kun," she said with a small laugh. "Most of the time I don't even try. Also, is Zaston still upstairs?" Naruto asked as he got up and moved to the fridge. "Guess I'll start cooking then. Lala, pass me the phone from the hall, and I'll invite Mikan-chan and Rito over for dinner so they can meet you and Zaston." "You going to stay, Mikado-sensei?" Naruto asked the woman who just smiled at him. "Why not? I've been curious to how you cook after seeing that pantry stocked full of ramen." "Is that all you eat, Naruto-kun?" she asked him as his eye twitched. "No, I just enjoy the meal of the gods that it is. It is only brought down by its waiting time and nutritional value for a meal, otherwise it would be perfect for anyone to eat whenever they want. And please don't go snooping around my house even if Lala let you in with the key I gave her." Naruto then took out ingredients for the meal he was going to cook for the fairly large group. It had been a while since he cooked for a group. It wasn't long before Rito and Mikan had joined the group around the table for dinner. Rito was surprised to see Mikado at the table. It must have shown on his face, because she looked over to him for a second to give him a small smirk and wink, an action which caused a blush to appear on the shy orange-haired teen's face. Mikan had chosen to help Naruto out in the kitchen, while Zaston and Lala talked about their purchases. Mikado did what she did best, well after medical work, which was teasing. And her target was none other than Rito, having heard about the young boy recently entering a relationship with Haruna from Naruto before the two teens arrived. The blonde had told her so that she wouldn't tease him about his own engagement with Lala. Plus Rito was such an easy target for her, due to the over-the-top reactions to even the most mild of teasing. Your fiancé is very pretty Naruto-ni-chan. Is she the reason you've never bothered getting a girlfriend? Mikan asked curiously as she cut the vegetables and mushrooms. Naruto looked up from where he was cooking the pork belly in his skillet and turned his head to look at her. Actually, my engagement only happened just recently. As in, not even a few days ago recently, he admitted while adding ginger, sake and chicken stock to his skillet and let the ingredients cook. I'll explain the whole thing once we sit down for dinner. Thanks for helping me make dinner, by the way. I kind of figured you would want to take a break since you're always cooking for you and Rito. Mikan just shook her head. It's fine, she said as she poured some noodles into a pan with some water and began boiling them on the hob. I like cooking, plus you helped me practice, so it only feels right helping you. Besides, Mikado-san is already teasing Rito, so it's unfair if I tease him too. I can just poke fun at him later for him needing you to help him get a date. She giggled and Naruto laughed, knowing that this was true. As they cooked, the two of them could literally hear a stuttering Rito from all the way in the kitchen. The two chefs chuckled hearing Rito being teased by Mikado, her mischievous and teasing voice coming over the stuttering mess of a teen. Yeah, that would be too cruel. Just remember not to tease him too much. Naruto told Mikan, who rolled her eyes, but smirking as she checked on the noodles with a pair of chopsticks, and Naruto tasted his broth. I can't help it, he really needs some good-natured ribbing. I mean, he is just so innocent with how he ends up looking like he's been sitting in a hot spring for far too long. Besides, even though I'm his sister, he hasn't told me anything about Haruna-san. All I know is that she's this girl he's had an uber crush on since, like, middle school. And even then, it's only because I saw him writing his name and Haruna-san's within a heart on his homework one time while daydreaming. I have a right to make fun of him for being such a coward. And that was that as far as Mikan was concerned. It was her right as his sister to make fun of him until his face looked like a lobster. She smirked at the thought before focusing on her cooking, taking out the noodles and began draining them by the sink. I suppose I can't really argue with that. Still, I think you should at least wait a week or two before laying into him like that. You know, give him some time to adjust. Not only because Rito was going to have a hell of a time at school dealing with Riza and Mio, but also because Naruto had no doubt that the many issues Rito used to have when asking Haruna out would carry over even now that they were in a relationship. Maybe now, especially now that he and Haruna were dating. You say that like you have no intentions of teasing him yourself. Knowing you, you'll probably do or say something that will embarrass him to no end, take a picture, and then post it all over the school. By the way, if you do take pictures, send me one of them. It'd make a great Christmas card this year. I can just see everyone's faces when they see a red-in-face Rito doing something perverted to his girlfriend. Mikan giggled as she placed the noodles with the ingredients for the servings of yakisoba. This would be one of the dishes for dinner, the others being katsudon, with dango for dessert. Mikan helped bring the food to the large table where the two off-world guests gazed at all of the delicious-looking dishes. The others at the table were looking at the food with ravenous, hungry eyes. Seeing all of the food, everyone was glad they had decided to come over, or stayed over as was the case with Mikado, for dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce my new house guest and Seinen High's newest student, Lala Satalin Devaluk. Naruto gestured to the princess, who smiled as she was serving up some yakisoba for herself. Hi, nice to meet you, Rito and Mikan. I hope we can get along fine while I'm here. Please treat me nicely and let's celebrate my and Naruto-kun's engagement too. She said as Mikan, with the others, raised a glass. Naruto just served himself a plate of food and began eating, simply enjoying the sounds of laughter at the table. He always liked it when Rito and Mikan came round, or he went to their house for dinner. It was probably because even after all these years, spending time with friends helped fight off the boredom of eternal life. The meal seemed to pass by in a blur, With everyone talking and chatting happily, Naruto almost felt like he was a part of a family. A large, dysfunctional family that seemed hell-bent on seeing how many shades of red Rito's face was capable of, but a family nonetheless. It was something the blonde treasured. As someone who had lived a long life, the blonde immortal shinobi tended to be very selective about the kinds of people he allowed himself to grow close to. After dinner, Naruto, Lala and Zaston had waved goodbye to the others, saying they'd see them in the morning. Once the door was closed, Naruto turned to his now housemates. "Why don't you two head upstairs for bed? I'll clean the dishes. I'll see you both in the morning." And Lala, the girls perked up, "Stay in your bed tonight." Lala pouted a bit at his words before turning to head upstairs. However, once her face was no longer visible by Naruto, she let a small smirk appear on her lips as she went to her room and closed the door behind her. Once closed, she flipped open her phone and types in a few numbers, teleporting one of her personal tools. "Lala-sama, why are you bringing out the Omni tool?" Peek questioned from atop her head, as Lala held a strange wand-like device with wing-like attachments on the top of it. The Omni tool was an all-purpose tool that allowed Lala to tinker with and modify any type of mechanical item. It was also the tool she used the most whenever creating one of her inventions. "Just going to make a small adjustment to my room, Peek, it's nothing to worry about." She smiled as she set about her business, while at the same time, Zaston sat in his room, checking over his beam sword to ensure it was in working order. He didn't want to have an accident and have it blow up in his face when he and Naruto would eventually spar, something he was greatly looking forward to. As the two Devilukes were in their room, Naruto, after clearing away the dishes, had walked into his garden out back. The garden was full of all sorts of flora, a few of them imported, or simply moved from his previous homes across the world. It was here that he would often meditate and speak with a being who had been with him since his conception. Sitting with his legs crossed, eyes closed and breathing slow and steady, Naruto let himself drift to his mindscape. When he reopened his eyes, he was in a dense forest surrounded by various animals. Where his mindscape inside of the seal had once been a sewer, it had since changed, happening a few years after the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi War. It only seemed fair to his tenant, after all the help he had been in that battle. Walking past all the trees, he came to a waterfall that stood high above him. But at the base, relaxing on top of a stone at the base sleeping, was the nine-tailed fox, Kurama. The great Biju had shrunk itself after the remodeling, so he felt more comfortable, and so catching the creatures was more fun for him. Walking past all the trees, he came to a waterfall that stood high above him. But at the base, relaxing on top of a stone at the base sleeping, was the nine-tailed fox, Kurama. No longer a 50-story fox of rage and destruction, the great Biju had decreased in size so that he could bask in the new mindscape comfortably. That, and in the kitsune's own words, "It's much more fun hunting the animals when you have to as opposed to when you can just step on them and not even realize it." He and Naruto had spoken much over the past 3,000 years, and eventually become brothers in all but blood. It was a bond the blonde shinobi cherished, as Kurama was the only person who had always been with him, while everyone else in his life passed away with time. "Yo, Kurama," Naruto shouted to the fox, who opened one of his red eyes, and looked up from his sleeping position. Naruto, the last and most powerful of the Biju, greeted with a large yawn. Even though he had shrunk in size, his voice was just as gravely and demonic as ever. Not that the evil-sounding voice bothered Naruto. It was just something Kurama enjoyed doing as a habit. The kitsune looked at him for a moment, his red eyes glinting as he peered into Naruto's blue. Finally, he said, "I'm curious, you don't usually come here unless it's your birthday, or mine. Or you've gotten yourself into some kind of trouble." As Naruto stopped in his tracks, a slightly sheepish expression coming over his face, Kurama fought the urge to chuckle. Even though only he and Naruto were here, he still had a reputation to keep. "Care to tell me what you have gotten us into this time?" he asked. "I'm engaged." There was a moment of silence between the two of them. Several crows cawed in the distance. Then, "Bawahahahahaha." As Kurama laughed out loud, Naruto had the decency to blush, a bright shade of red that would have made Hinata proud. "You, the immortal shinobi who refuses to get himself a girlfriend, has gotten hitched." "Oh, haha. Oh, Kami, this is too much." The fox rolled onto his back as he kept laughing at Naruto, who began glaring at the fox. "Kurama, Stop laughing or I'm muzzling you again. Naruto shouted enraged at how his friend was making fun of his situation. Hee sore. Right, but I just found the whole thing funny. Can I see your memories to get up to speed? Naruto nodded, mentally channeling the recent events into Kurama's head. The two could easily share memories after so long together in the seal. Once he got the memories, Naruto could hear sniggering from Kurama and stomped his foot to the ground. When he did, golden chains sprouted from his back and rattled loudly. Hearing them, Kurama stopped laughing and turned to the still glaring Naruto. Though even seeing the chains, Kurama still couldn't keep the smirk from his face. Shaking his head, he said, "Only you, Naruto. Only you could possibly end up engaged to the princess of a man who is effectively the supreme ruler of the universe. I swear, this must be Kami's way of saying good karma can be just as much of a bitch as bad karma." Naruto clicked his teeth, dispelling the chains. He wasn't going to use them, except as a slight threat to his brother to not make fun of him. It's not like I asked for this. And now I'm stuck in this engagement for 6 months. 6 months of Lala making constant attempts to make me fall in love with her, and make me believe she isn't just doing this to escape from her royal responsibility. Not to mention all the assassins, which are undoubtedly going to start coming after my head, which leads me to why I am here. Kurama stared as Naruto took a small breath. I need to get back into shape. I'm like a newly minted genin compared to my prime during the 4th Shinobi War. I need to regain my skills in taijutsu, kenjutsu, ninjutsu and retrain my body to be ready for anything. I was hoping you would be willing to help me with this, Kurama, he said to his friend, who gave another chuckle. Of course I'll help, Kurama said, causing the blonde to sigh in relief. The Biju's next words, however, did not make Naruto feel better in the slightest. However, if I'm going to help you, I'll be accessing your 5 senses a lot more. After all, it's only right I get compensation in the form of watching all the chaos you and this girl create for my prime source of entertainment. Naruto's right eye began to twitch violently as he realized that Kurama was never going to let him live this down. He bet that even 1,000 years from now the old kitsune would still be saying, "Hey Brad, remember how you got yourself engaged to that alien princess way back? Ah, good times. Yeah, no matter what he did there was no way this was going to end well. Alright, but I don't want to hear any asinine comments that I would normally expect coming out of Ero Sennin's mouth." Kami, he could almost hear that old perv giggling away as he wrote in his notebook while muttering, "Pure gold." He didn't even want to think about what that man would say in a situation like this. Kurama, however, groaned at hearing the blonde's demand. "Oh, come on, Naruto. If you won't make any, then I will. Like I did back in Sweden a few years ago during the Olympics and all those hot blonde girls were cheering with their bye." "Shut it, Ero Kitsune," Naruto shouted, blocking his ears as the memory of that particular incident resurfaced. It had a good day to be him that day, but he refused to hear it from Kurama, who had taken on the role of the pervert in Naruto's life, aside from Saru. However, that kid, perverted as he was, had nothing on Kurama, who had millions of hours of material due to the many interesting situations Naruto had ended up in that involved women. Hey, he was over 3,000 years old. He had needs, and with all of the experience he had when it came to pleasing and dealing with women, his luck with the fairer had taken a turn for the better since his genin days. Though, as Naruto looked at the kitsune before him, giggling like a pervert, the blonde was beginning to think about amending those thoughts. Ah, Sweden. Good times, good times. Kurama sighed in memory before turning back to Naruto. Anywho, I'll help out with getting you get back up to full strength, Naruto. But I have one condition aside from the access to your senses. Naruto looked up, raising an eyebrow at Kurama. What is it? He asked the fox. Give the girl a chance. I know being an immortal and all has made you feel put off when it came to getting married, and even falling in love to some degree. But I ask that at the very least, you give Lala a chance. Even if it's a 1 in a million chance, I get the feeling this girl might just surprise you in the end. Naruto digested Kurama's words and knew he couldn't lie to the one who knew him best. I'll do as you ask. If only to show her that it won't work when the knowledge of my age comes out. With that, Naruto faded from the mindscape and back to his conscious mind, leaving Kurama behind on the rock. Kurama watched the spot Naruto had disappeared from before heaving a sigh. I hope you are wrong, Naruto. I don't think you even realize it yet, but you need her far more than she needs you. I can only do so much. Shaking off the depressing thoughts, Kurama began looking through Naruto's memory of the past couple years to get a full catch-up of what he missed. Maybe he could find some good blackmail material. Back outside, Naruto opened his eyes to the feeling of Kurama sending chakra through his system, giving it a jump start. Better head to the forest, may as well do some clone training there. Standing up, he jumped to the roof and set off, hopping across rooftops and towards the park to practice with his clones and some of the more original techniques he'd come up with out of boredom or curiosity. After a long day of training, Naruto had eventually made his way back home. Slipping into his room via the window, the blonde made his way into bed and was asleep before his head had even hit the pillow. Who knew retraining your body to be at the same level of peak conditioning it had been during a war where everybody else had what humans today would call superpowers could be so difficult? He had managed to perform a few of his old skills perfectly, although not without stretching his chakra coils out a bit. He wouldn't be capable of performing any of his higher-tier jutsu without a lot more practice, but it wasn't as bad as he initially feared. He'd have to train for several more weeks before he could perform any of his fire, water and earth techniques. Thankfully, he was still able to use some of his lightning and wind techniques, though it was only the lower-tier techniques, E to B-ranked jutsu like the Daitopa and Raikyu. His taijutsu was okay for the moment, better than any human could ever hope to achieve. However, that was only taking humans into account, not possible alien assassins. As much as he hated it, there was no way for him to know just how powerful sentient beings that lived in the greater part of the galaxy were. Not that this was going to keep him down, it just meant he would need to train harder. When the morning sun began shining into his bedroom, Naruto turned his head in an attempt to hide his eyes from the light when he felt his face press into something soft and squishy. If I'm right, then Lala is in my bed. Opening his eyes he found himself staring at a very nice pair of S and it allowed him to know that, yes, Lala had indeed entered his bed sometime during the night and like last time, was sleeping in the nude. Almost mechanically, Naruto turned his head again to look at his door, and was surprised when he found the seal he had placed on it still intact. What the hell? How did she manage to bypass my security seal? That should have kept her out of my room, and there is no way she could have disabled it. Seriously, what the hell is up with? Wait, is that a draft? Naruto turned his head making Lala giggle as his hair tickled her chest. Trying to ignore the inner pervert in him demanding he looked at such a lovely pair of S. The blonde was able to see his window was still open from after he had come in from training. Well shit, that explains it. Hello, by the log. Sakura got reincarnated as a babe. Naruto, I demand you stick your face in her bosom so that I might feel the soft squishiness for myself. Kurama's voice echoed in his head making Naruto sweat drop. Great, so on top of his own inner pervert, he now had a perverted kitsune acting as the peanut gallery. What the hell did he do to deserve this? With a heavy sigh, Naruto closed his eyes and managed to replace himself with a pillow. Lala whimpered slightly at the loss of the warm body, and quickly wrapped her arms around the pillow in the hopes that it would provide that warmth to her. Ah, don't do that, Kurama whined. I'm already regretting my decision to allow you access to my senses. Naruto deadpanned to his friend and tenant. Kami, it's like you've become a furry version of Ero Sennin. Naruto shuddered as he heard the chuckle of Kurama. Naruto, eventually you will come to see things as your Kyofu did, and as I do now. It's only a matter of time, and hey, who knows, maybe once you've let yourself go you'll end up with a harem of beautiful women ready to take to your every need. Ah, if only I had a human body. Just think, all the women. Kurama trailed off as his mind went a world that all perverted minds go to at some point in their life. That place of course, is a world he is imagining himself in Naruto's shoes. Yes, he could see it all now, the things he would do as Naruto, the women he would charm, and their blissful expressions after he treated them to a night of passion. Seriously, the kid just didn't know how good he had it. Of all the things Kurama could have become, why did he have to become a pervert? Sometimes I think it would have been better if we were still at each other's throats. Oh holy log, please answer my call and find some way to kuriwimi me with some unsuspecting who has no luck with women. In another dimension, a high school student who couldn't touch women without breaking out in hives let out a violent sneeze. Morning, Naruto-kun, mumbled Lala from the bed, sitting up exposing her nude form as she rubbed her eyes. Naruto had absolutely no clue whether or not she made a show of it, but god damn if she didn't have that cute and wide dichotomy down pat. Not that Naruto was actually paying attention to such things. Really? This is going to keep happening, isn't it? Naruto deadpanned to the girl who titled her head in slight confusion. What are you talking about? Never mind, morning Lala. I'm going to take a shower, you go get changed into your uniform and I'll see you downstairs. Naruto collected his uniform before entering his ensuite bathroom. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. Nothing at all. Anyways, good morning to you too. I'm going to take a shower, you go get changed into your uniform and I'll see you downstairs. Naruto collected his uniform before leaving the room and entering his own private bathroom. Okay Doki, see you then. Lala hopped off the bed and went to the door, only to find she couldn't open it. Seeing as her clothes were in her room, she went over to the side wall and pushed against one side, making a small section of the wall rotate like a sliding door. I hope Naruto-kun doesn't mind the slight modification to his house. Lala then proceeded to get dressed in her uniform, putting on one of her new pairs of panties and bras she had gotten yesterday. She also fixed peak to her hair, who was still in her charging period. It wasn't long before Naruto had finished his show and began getting dressed in his own school uniform. Unsealing the door without much thought, he made his way downstairs, creating a clone to wake Zaston up for breakfast and began getting started on breakfast. He also started on the boxed lunches for him, Zaston and Lala, and, remembering the deal he made yesterday, made some for Riza and Mio as well. It only took a few minutes for Naruto to cook breakfast and set the table for 3. Good thing too, as he soon heard the sound of feet coming down the stairs. While Lala was smiling in her uniform, Zaston had chosen to wear a pair of jeans, black shoes, white shirt and leather jacket. He looked quite fashionable and would no doubt be catching many a woman's eye, if he left the house today, that is. Morning Zaston, tea or coffee? Naruto asked as the night blinked for a moment. Tea please, Naruto dono. He sat down at the table as Naruto filled his cup with tea. While Naruto poured the steamy liquid into a cup for Zaston, Lala was pouring herself some orange juice. Okay everyone, dig in. No one needed to be told twice, all 3 of them broke their chopsticks and clapped their hands together. Itadakamasu. It only took one bite before Lala and Zaston found themselves in love with the food Naruto cooked, evidenced by the sparkle in their eyes and the way they began devouring their meals at a pace that would have put Choji to shame. More than Lala, Zaston couldn't help but be surprised at how good Naruto's cooking was. Having had some of the best chefs in the universe when he was at the palace, he had been able to eat all kinds of delicious food. Naruto's food, however, had something in it that added that extra flavor that just made it better than everything else he had tried. He couldn't place it, but figured that was part of what made the blonde's cooking so good. Wanting to know what the bodyguard of his fiancé would be up to so that the man wouldn't get in trouble, Naruto asked, "Do you have any plans for today, Zaston?" Zaston looked up with his chopsticks still in his mouth, blinking. He took a moment to swallow what food he had before saying, "To be honest, I'm not really sure. But I believe it would be best if I take a tour of the city, so I can gain a better understanding of this planet's culture. I feel that is the best course of action to take when planning to live on an unfamiliar planet." Naruto nodded as he took a piece of paper from the side and wrote down a number. "Okay, since you plan on going out, take this. It's the number to my personal cell phone. If you find something that you have casitons about, or heaven forbid find yourself in some kind of trouble, give me a call. Okay?" He slid the note to the man, who gave an appreciative nod and in turn wrote his own number for Naruto, in case he needed it. "I will. I appreciate the assistance you have given, Naruto dono." Naruto waved his thanks off and finished his breakfast. When he was done, the blonde took out his wallet and placed a few bills into a spare wallet he had in his drawer. "Since I doubt you have any Japanese currency, take this just in case you find something you might need to buy or to use if you plan on taking the subway or a bus." He put the wallet into Zaston's hand, despite a small protest from the man. "There is no way I can accept this, Naruto dono. You have already offered me a place to stay, this is just too much." Naruto shook his head at the man's words. "You're my guest, and I always look after my guests, even if they have strange habits." He glanced at Lala, who was still eating her rice. Zaston seemed to agree as Naruto noticed his shoulders slump a little. He knew exactly what Naruto was referring to, having experienced both Lala and her sister's behavior over the years. He only hoped that Lala's younger sisters wouldn't decide to visit for some time and let him have some peace. Indeed, but what's this box wrapped in a cloth, and why is my name on it? Zaston asked curiously. Naruto looked faintly amused by the man's curiosity. It's called a bento, and it's your lunch for today so you don't go hungry, obviously. Also, make sure to keep your tail hidden. Lala might be able to away with people thinking it's an accessory, but you, not so much. He suggested to the man, and the knight nodded in agreement. Tails were something the beings of this planet didn't have and would be shocked to see his swinging about behind him. Naruto then turned to Lala, who had finished her meal and was wiping her face with a napkin, all with her usual bright smile. Thank you for breakfast, Naruto-kun. Are we going to walk to school with Rito again? Naruto gave a nod as he collected the plates and took them to the kitchen, loading them in the dishwasher. Yes, we are. However, before we get to school, I want you to promise me something. Lala tilted her head in curiosity of his words. I want you to promise not to tell anyone at school that you are an alien. You may tell them about our engagement, although I'd advise not telling them how it all happened. If they ask, tell them your father set it up with my parents. Since I'm an orphan, the excuse can't be confirmed or denied. Lala took in Naruto's request, and while happy she would be able to tell people that she was marrying Naruto, couldn't help but feel slightly concerned about what he said about him being an orphan. Thinking it through, she did notice that the house was devoid of photos. There wasn't a single picture of Naruto's family in the house. There had been no evidence of where he came from, and it troubled her to a degree. I'll just have to learn more about this before time runs out. The more I know about Naruto-kun, the easier it might be to get closer to him. Not letting her thoughts be known, Lala nodded at Naruto's request. I'll keep the secret, Naruto-kun. But I want to talk after school about something, alright? Naruto simply nodded, not seeing any harm in hearing out her request. Sure, now come on, we don't want to be late for school, do we? Lala gave a nod, collecting her new school bag that Mikado had helped her buy. After putting her boxed lunch inside her bag, she slung it over her shoulder and exited the house. Naruto followed shortly after, checking to make sure the house's locks and security seals were working properly. He closed the door behind him and locked up, putting his keys into his left pocket. As they began walking away from the house, the pair spotted Rito leaving his house, stretching his arm and releasing a small yawn. No doubt he had been woken up by Mikan just a few minutes ago. Yo, Rito, Naruto called out to the boy. Orange hair. No wonder he's your friend. Kurama chuckled as he got a good look at the kid his tenant was friends with. Naruto just barely managed to keep his right eye from twitching. Deciding on a little payback, he chose to create a mental image for the kitsune's benefit. This particular image featured a tall man wearing green spandex and orange leg warmers and a bowl-cut hairstyle. The most distracting thing, however, was the man's eyebrows, which looked like two living caterpillars. Standing in front of Kurama within the mindscape was the one thing that made the ancient kitsune want to run away in terror. Rock Lee standing against a sunset beach, giving him the nice guy pose, complete with a wide smile and sparkling teeth that pained. Yosh, Kuruma-kun, it is time for you to enjoy the springtime of youth. No, oh God, it burns, my eyes. Dear sweet Kami, what did I do to deserve such cruel torture? As Kurama's shouts of agony became nothing more than whimpers, Naruto snickered and let the image fade away within his mindscape. Another image took its place, this one a sign. Break our promise again, and its sunset scene with Lee and Guy. It read, and Kurama prayed to Kami that nothing would tempt him to speak, run off at the mouth and annoy Naruto again. There were very few things that he felt were worse than death. Lee and Guy in any capacity just happened to be at the top of that very small list. Fighting with Gyuki, the eight-tailed octopus ox. Tentacles were better than those two. Naruto, shouted Sarayama, running toward Naruto, who merely raised his left foot and allowed it to slam into the other boy's face. Morning, Naruto said in a rather bland tone of voice as Sarayama slumped to the ground, now having a foot imprint on his face. Lala just giggled, since this scene was one she had seen before with her sister Nana and Zaston when he was trying to scold her. Naruto, how can you do that to your friend, especially in front of the really pretty girl next to you? Saru cried in outrage, animate tears of frustration pouring down his eyes. Easily, with a small feeling of satisfaction, the blonde said without a hint of shame. Naruto wondered if anyone else in the world had a problem like he did with Sarayama, always running toward him in the mornings. Elsewhere in Japan, a spiky orange-haired substitute Shinigami with a moody expression on his face, sneezed, just as he was delivering a piledriver to his brown-haired friend. Wiping a finger over his nose, he wondered who was talking about him before he shrugged and began walking to his class with his other friends. That's just cruel, Sarayama whined at his friend. No, just doing what needs to be done, because if I don't, you'll end up saying something that'll earn you the ire of every girl in school, Naruto pointed out as Saru stood tall and stuck out his chest, head held high. I do not, girls love me. Naruto rolled his eyes at the boy who, most unfortunately, decided to try and saddle up to Lala, a lecherous grin on his face. Hey there beautiful, how would you like to go with an HERGH? Sarayama's sentence was cut off by Naruto slamming his fist into the top of his head. Seriously, Saru, when are you going to learn? If Yui-chan was around, you'd be so dead right now. Naruto shook his head sadly at the young teen whose face was currently implanted into the floor. Meanwhile, Lala just looked between the two with an expression of idle curiosity. Nay, Naruto-kun, who's your friend? Lala asked curiously, looking down at Sarayama who was still lying face down on the floor. This is Saru, a friend of mine and Rito's. He's a bit of a pervert, so I often find myself having to babysit him. Normally, I had to give him a few love taps like the one you just saw to set him straight. A few of the girls around giggled hearing Naruto. Watching him deal with Sarayama always brought them some form of amusement. Despite some things staying the same however, the female students felt very wary of the new girl, Lala. This was a result of seeing her yesterday literally hanging of Naruto, an act which made them all jealous of the girl. It didn't help that Lala had a figure that they'd do anything for. Oh, okay, hi Saru-san, nice to meet you. Lala waved to the down boy. Sarayama just gave a muffled groan in reply, his left hand coming up to grab the back of his head as he pried his now flattened face off the floor. Lala, you still have your schedule for today? Naruto asked as she nodded, pulling the slip out from her bag. Good, let me have a look. Quickly looking over the sheet, Naruto saw that most of his lessons would be with Lala and sighed in slight relief. Having known Lala for the couple of days he could tell she'd end up getting into trouble and by proxy everyone around her would as well, so felt it would be best if he could keep an eye on her. Here, now let's get to class, before anything crazy happens. Naruto opened the door and held out one of his prepared boxed lunches. It was immediately claimed by Riza. Ah, Mio, we have a good lunch for today. No need to go on a bread run this day. Riza's words had Mio pump her fist in glee since the bread run was always a dangerous time in school. Riza, after putting the boxed lunch away for later, turned her attention back to Naruto and the new girl next to him. Ho, who do we have here? Naruto-kun, isn't this the girl from yesterday? Naruto replied with a simple nod as he took his seat, Lala sitting behind him. Hi, I'm Lala, I just moved here recently and I'm starting today. Riza smirked at the new girl. She and Mio began walking around her, almost as if surveying her. Unique and natural hair color that is bright and well taken care of. Cute face that is accentuated by her hair, personality probably matches. Cute tail accessory, adds something of a cosplay look that an otaku would die for. More importantly, she has a developed body. We'll need to take a measurement. Yes, I agree. Let's get down and test her reaction too. These were the observations the two friends made, which were no doubt the internal thoughts of the guys as they looked Lala over. As the two got close to Lala, their hands already making grasping motions as they imagined what it would feel like to have the pink-haired girl's S grasped in their hands, they ended up getting nailed in the head, as did a few drooling boys. Riza, I'll take that lunch back if you start doing that inside of class. There was a large sound of groaning from the downed students, all of them rubbing their foreheads from whatever hit them. Naruto-kun, that was really cool, how did you do that? Asked Lala, amazed at the display. It seemed that the more time she spent with Naruto, the more she learned about him. Many of which were really cool abilities that she hoped to learn someday too. Practice. This tends to happen fairly often, so I always get in a lot of practice during school. He tapped his chin, thinking of how many times in a day he actually had to nail perverts. Not including Sarayama and the principal, who usually got beat down enough times for every male in the school twice over. You know, your pranking of perverts has been something you've always done, even before we met. And just how did you become friends with the brunette chick, anyways? The moment I laid eyes on her, I've been getting the vibe that she goes both ways. Naruto resisted the urge to groan himself, hearing Kurama. Thin ice, Kurama. Naruto gave an acute mental warning of what would happen if the fox continued running at the mouth, but didn't act on the punishment since his comment wasn't quite perverted and more of an observation. I'll be good, the fox squeaked out. Do you think you could teach me how to do that as well? Lala asked. After registering the question, Naruto gave a nod, as it could prove beneficial to teach the girl how to deal with perverts, as it was very likely she would be subject to many of them in the classes he didn't have her with. Sure, it's not too hard to get it down, but it will take practice until you can get your aim right. Here, he placed the piece of eraser in Lala's hands and adjusted her hands, so that her thumb would launch the eraser piece. Now just aim and flick, I'll set a target. Hey Saru. The boy's head shot up from his position in the room. Sadly for him, he ended up back on the floor as Lala hit him square in the head. Her alien strength was on league with Naruto, so it hurt just the same as his attacks. Not bad. Lala smiled at Naruto's words. Hey Lala, do you want someone to help you find out where everything is in school after homeroom? Lala nodded at the question. I would love that. Does this mean you're going to give me a tour around the school? Her big eyes stared hopefully at Naruto. Said Blonde found it almost impossible to resist. Damn, what was it with him and pink-haired girls with beautiful emerald eyes? At least this one didn't hit him too much. Sorry, I don't think I'll be the one giving you the tour. After the teacher comes in and takes roll, he'll likely send you with the class representative. That's Haruna, the girl speaking with the stuttering Rito, there. He pointed to the nervous Rito speaking with the slightly shy Haruna. Oi Haruna-chan, come over here. He called over to his neighbor's girlfriend, who came over smiling. What it is, Naruto-san? Naruto gave her a small glare for using san at the end of his name but didn't comment. He knew this was just how Haruna was. I was saying that the teacher will probably choose you to help Lala here get her bearing around the school after homeroom. I was hoping you could look after her and show her the important places. Haruna smiled at Lala, offering a small bow. That would be fine. I'd be happy to show your new friend around, Naruto-san. Nice to meet you, Lala-san. My name is Sarenji Haruna, class representative of Class 1A. Lala gave a small bow of her own, hearing Haruna. Nice to meet you too, Haruna. I hope we can be friends here. Haruna nodded at the bright-eyed girl. It was hard for anyone not to want to befriend Lala. She was just so open and enthusiastic that people simply got swept up in it. They made small talk until the teacher arrived and announced that there was a new student and asked her to introduce herself. Lala stood up from her seat, turning to the class. Hi, my name is Lala Satalin Devaluk. I just moved here and am currently staying with Naruto-kun. Please treat me nicely while I'm here. She gave a small bow as many of the boys were going gaga over how cute Lala looked. However, there was one thing that gave many of the boys pause. Wait! Called out one of the boys as he replayed Lala's introduction in his head a few times. Why are you staying with Uzumaki? He asked, curious about the new hot classmate staying with the notorious blonde. The reply was one that, had Naruto not already anticipated it, would have face-palmed at hearing. He's my fiancé. Silence. It was so silent that the phrase, silent as the grave, didn't do it justice. However, it was merely the calm before the storm, which soon erupted into a pandemonium of chaos and anarchy as everyone in class began shouting. What? Was the shocked cry across the room, as many tried to figure out how this had happened. Naruto had gotten engaged without any of them knowing, and to someone they knew nothing about as well. Their minds raced, as mental pictures of how this all happened whizzed around in their brains. They all looked over to Naruto to see if he would confirm Lala's claim, though many of them hoped he would deny it. Sadly for the girls, and guys, he did with a single nod, not truly caring about what they wanted or thought. This sent the class into a small fit of whispers and mutterings. Sensei, Naruto called out in a dulled tone, making everyone stop. Can we continue with the lesson, please? The teacher at the front of the room offered a thankful nod. Naruto had always been able to quiet the class down with only a few words. Indeed, thank you Uzumaki-kun. Now let's proceed with roll call. The teacher began taking attendance. The rest of homeroom went smoothly, with the students paying attention to the teacher. The males didn't want any trouble after hearing Naruto's tone, which usually meant trouble for them. The reminder of Sarayama's screams haunted them and Sarayama himself. It taught them to never mess with Naruto, and never do anything incredibly perverted near him or the girls that were his friends lest they wished to suffer horrors that were so unimaginable it would make Chuck Norris cry out in fear. After class, Naruto, Lala and the others left the room and began walking toward their first lesson, which was math today. As they did, Riza couldn't help but send a sly glance to Lala as she saddled up next to the girl. How did you end up meeting Naruto-kun? Or better yet, how did you end up engaged to Naruto-kun? She inquired of the girl with curiosity, eager to know how the girl had gotten her hands on Naruto. It was set up by our parents. Naruto-kun only found out when I ended up at his house. Naruto received many curious looks due to the fact his parents were mentioned. The mystery of Naruto's parents was something many wanted to know, since he was an orphan living on his own with seemingly no family support, nor had he ever mentioned his family at all. Surprised me as well, it must have been set up before I was born. That's my best guess, anyways. Naruto's comment had Riza, Mio, Rito, Haruna and Saru nodding in agreement, seeing as there wasn't really any other explanation. Does this mean Lala-san's family might be able to tell you about your parents, Naruto-san? Haruna questioned the blonde, hoping he would get some answers about his family. Maybe, though I don't know how much they'll be able to tell me. Besides, it doesn't bother me after living on my own for so long. The only difference now is that I'm temporarily engaged and have house guests. This drew the attention of the girls, hearing the word temporary. Why temporary? Mio asked, confusion evident in her tone. Lala's father gave her a 6-month probation period for the engagement after I argued that forcing her on me might not be the best for her. We might not even be compatible in the long run. His explanation set the fangirls of Naruto minds running. You argued about being engaged to a really cute girl? Most people would just accept it after seeing Lala-chan. Sarayama received a small stare from Naruto. I'm not most people, and I would never agree to something if I believed it was wrong, which I can assure you forcing someone into an arranged marriage is. Just like me, Lala is her own person, and I'm not going to tie her down just because our families set this up before either of us were born. His friends and Naruto all stared as Naruto walked ahead, before rushing to catch up with him. While his friends began whispering about him, Lala stared at Naruto with a look of awe. He really wanted her to be able to choose her own path, something she had never truly been allowed to do. Hearing his words, Lala found that more than ever she wanted to be with him. He was so different from everyone else that had proposed to her. Though given how she had proposed to him, it might not be fair lumping the blonde in with her other suitors. But it wasn't just that either, she was also amazed at how mature he was. While Lala may act ditzy, she wasn't considered an unrivaled genius for nothing. While most of her talent lay in making her many inventions, she did have a detailed understanding of how people tended to mature with age. It begged her to wonder, just how was Naruto so mature when he was only 17 years old? As the morning progressed, word spread of Naruto's engagement. The news was met with shock and surprise among many of the other students. Looking at one particular student, we find ourselves in the girls' changing rooms, where the students of Class 1B were getting ready for their PE lesson. Hey, did you hear the rumor going round? No, what is it? They say Naruto-sama has been seen with a new girl around him. But that's not much news, there are a lot of girls that would love to be seen around him. Yeah, I know, but it's really not good news for any of us really. Why? Naruto-sama is engaged to the new girl in school. Bang! The sound that echoed in the room came from a student who slammed her locker closed upon hearing the gossip. This student had long black hair that reached down her back, stopping a bit above her waist, and bright yellow, almost cat-like irises. She also had one of the more developed busts of the class, something that many of the other students had noticed during their previous PE lessons. This girl was Kotogawa Yui, student representative of Class 1B. She was a friend of Naruto's who she greatly respected due to the fact he was regularly seen disciplining many of the male students that often acted shamelessly in her opinion. She tried to eat lunch with him and his friends on occasion, But Riza and Mio made her feel embarrassed due to how they always took note of her figure and would comment on her crush for the blonde. Hearing that Naruto was engaged came as something of a shocker for the girl. Naruto's engaged. I'm going to need to speak with him after this lesson. And I also want to see this girl he's engaged to. Nodding to herself, Yui left the room with the other girls, all of whom were looking at Yui in surprise, wondering why she slammed her locker shut like that. She was usually one of the calmest students in the class. Class soon started and the PE teacher had the students go through their usual stretches before setting them off jogging round the field. Yui went through the motions as she always did, but her mind was a million miles away. She barely even paid attention to the coach as he had them go through their various tasks. When class ended and the girls were back in their uniforms, the bell rang, signaling the start of lunchtime. Knowing where Naruto and his friends usually went for their lunch, Yu set off for the classroom of 1A. As she walked toward the room, she sped past Haruna, who was still in the process of showing Lala around, having been in her previous lesson. As Yui stormed through the school, a stern look on her face, every student in the hallway scrambled to get out of her way. Some pressed against the wall, others hid behind the nearest door, those who were on the stairs took off like a bat out of hell, and still some simply froze, shivering as they felt death touch their souls. Every student in Seinen High feared that look. It was a look that usually meant trouble, for them at least. Opening the door to class 1A, Yui saw that Naruto was feeding himself while a beautiful pink-haired girl sat next to him, eating from a bento box identical to Naruto's, meaning that he had most likely made it for her. Yui's entrance did not go unnoticed, as Naruto looked up from his lunch to see the dark-haired girl looking at him with a large frown on her face. "Oi, Yui-chan. What's wrong? You look upset over something?" Naruto stood up from his desk and made his way over to the girl. She probably just heard about Lala and is jealous. You know, this girl's quite the looker too. She can even compete with Lala in the bust department. I don't understand why she's worried. Naruto could almost picture the lecherous grin on the old kitsune's face. Besides, if she's so jealous you could just invite her to join you and Lala as you build up Gurk. Kurama's perverted tirade was cut short as Naruto created a large jizo, like the ones you see in Buddhist temples, in his mind and let it drop on the fox's head. "Uzumaki-kun, is it true that you have recently become engaged with a new student?" Yui then looked over at Lala, who had a noodle hanging out of her mouth as she stared at the black-haired girl curious, then looked back at the blonde. "Is it her?" Naruto nodded at the question, but raised his hand before Yui could say anything else. "Yes, as it turns out our marriage was arranged by her and my parents before they died, so I had no idea. She appeared before me yesterday and her father asked I take care of her and her uncle, who is also staying with me. Oh, and you'll be pleased to know that there will be no more attempted gropings by the pervy sisters over there." He gestured to a blissful-looking Mio and Riza who had begun eating from the bento Naruto made them. "Oh, I see." Yui's tone was a mix of embarrassment and relief as she placed a hand on her chest, taking a breath to calm herself down. "Well, I guess that's why you've never mentioned this on an earlier date. For a few minutes I thought you had intentionally kept this from me." Naruto put a hand on her shoulder, giving her a small shake. "I try not to keep important secrets from my friends." He almost winced at the irony of that statement, but shook his guilt off and pushed on. "Plus, this engagement might end up only being 6 months, if Lala or I don't feel that it's right. Anyways, since you're here I should probably introduce you to Lala, come over here." The pink-haired princess hopped onto her feet and walked over happily to the two. "What is it? Is she another friend of yours?" Lala asked, her enthusiastic voice laden with curiosity. Naruto gave a small nod. "Lala, this is one of my friends from another class, Kodagawa Yui. We've known each other a couple years and became fast friends too." Naruto smiled as Yui gave a small smile, the only kind she ever gave, as she remembered how they had met. It had been during Naruto's first term at the school as a transfer student. As his senior and since he had yet to get a schedule, she had been ordered to show him around. Before they had left the principal's office however, Ero Kyucho, perverted principal, made a lecherous comment about how Yui should wear a skirt with a higher cut to show off more of her legs. Both of them had slammed his head into the table, not only knocking him unconscious, but also leaving an indent in the shape of his face on the desk. It was that meeting and several after that event that Yui had learned that Naruto wasn't like most boys and was actually decent and kind. However, she didn't have a crush on him, and did not in any way think his whiskers were cute. Not one bit. "Hello, my name's Lala, it's nice to meet you. I hope we can be friends here, plus a friend of Naruto-kun's is a friend of mine too." Yui smiled a little nervously at Lala. It might be that Naruto's fiancée was so beautiful or how honest she seemed. Still, just because she felt slightly self-conscious in front of his gorgeous and open girl, did not mean she couldn't be nice. It had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that she was jealous. "Honest, I would very much like to be friends with you as well. By the way, I was just curious. Where are you from?" she asked, curious since pink hair was not a natural color, unless dyed, whereas Lala's looked very natural. Lala blinked, pressing her index finger under her lower lip and looking up at the ceiling with an adorable expression of thought, which caused every male in class, even Naruto to some extent, to gulp. Lala tried to find an answer. She remembered Naruto telling her not to state that she was an alien, and she didn't want to cause him any trouble. At the same time, she had never been a good liar. Realizing that she should probably say something, as Yui was beginning to tap her foot impatiently while giving her this really weird look, Lala said the first thing that came to mind. "I really don't remember." Lala laughed nervously as Yui and several other people face-faulted at the girl, wondering if she was being serious or just messing with them. Wanting to change the subject as she didn't like lying, she said, "But I really like this town so far, especially all of the different stores that Mikado-sensei took me yesterday." "Mikado-sensei took you shopping?" Yui questioned, sounding surprised that the doctor would take such a personal interest in a student. Though perhaps in hindsight, she shouldn't have been. "I asked Mikado-sensei to help her out while I was in school, and since Lala didn't have any clothes decided it would be a good idea to take her shopping yesterday." Naruto informed her as they walked back over to the small group they had been eating their lunch with. Sitting down, Yui pulled out her own bento. "Say Rito, what lesson is it after lunch?" Naruto asked the teen as he picked up a taiko sausage with his chopsticks. I think it's PE." Naruto nodded, accepting the answer. He wondered what they'd end up doing and if there was any point actually going instead of a clone. "If it's jogging again, I'm cloning and going to do some real training," he thought to himself, seeing as he could use some more practice with his taijutsu. He wanted to train himself back to the point where his movements flowed smoothly from one form to another and packed all the power they used to in his prime. Naruto also realized that he would need to retain his muscle memory, since just like real muscles his instinctive reactions had probably dulled as well. "There's no sense in you wasting your time in PE class, just use my chakra to fortify your clone. That should make it more capable of surviving anything that gets thrown at it." Kurama offered his opinion on the matter. The kitsune took a moment to look at the dark-haired girl through the eyes of his container. "You know this girl likes you, as in, likes you, right?" the fox muttered, as Naruto gave a mental sigh. "I know, but I'd rather be her friend than break her heart. Yui-chan has been a good friend like Rito and the others. But our curse doesn't really allow for partners, does it?" Kurama gave a sigh of his own. "My chakra, your Uzumaki bloodline, the eyes of the old man and having mastered the art of senjutsu, all of them together form the ingredients for immortality. I still find it ironic that out of all the people searching for the ability to live forever, the only person who never wanted it received it. Sometimes irony can be almost as cruel as that Teme, Murphy. I'm also sorry for my own contribution to your curse." Naruto just chuckled as he listened to the old fox. "I could never blame you, Kurama. You're my lifelong friend, the one person that been with me through it all. You know, I was thinking, it's been a while since we gave you a body outside of the seal. Maybe we should do that now?" Naruto was referring to the times when he had used a fox's fresh corpse to house Kurama's spirit, and Naruto had carried him around until the body the Biju was in died, releasing Kurama back to the seal. "At least find me a male body this time. Do you have any idea how weird it is having female anatomy for several years? I swear I was in heat during the summers and males were sniffing my butt." Naruto chuckled in his head as he had, accidentally, put Kurama in a female fox's body last time he did the transfer. "Don't worry, you'll get a male body for sure. I have no idea as to how I ended up getting a female body last time." He was lucky Kurama couldn't feel the smirk on his face. Otherwise he'd never hear the end of his belly aching. You had better, or I'm going to make your life as miserable as mine will be. Kurama threatened him, and was more than willing to deliver on his threat. Naruto gave a quick affirmative to his friend's words, then stepped out of his mental conversation to focus back on the outside world. Lunch continued for some time after that. Lala and Yui seemed to be hitting it off pretty well. Although the dark-haired girl did hide behind Naruto when Riza and Mio finished their lunch, fearing she would be fondled by them again. She was just thankful that a glare from Naruto stopped them before they could even think about it. Really, her friend was so sweet. But she did not have a crush on him. When PE finally rolled around, Naruto took Kurama's advice and created a clone before heading out to a nearby park that was surrounded by trees, making it a good place to train his speed and agility. His muscles tensed, body coiling like a loaded spring as he prepared for a big leap. He jumped, hitting the branch off one tree, then hopping to the next without a second to spare. Naruto moved through the trees at the highest speed he could go while still maintaining enough control that he didn't crash into anything. He wanted to get used to the high-speed movement that were often involved in shinobi battles. That way he could regain his ability to move at incredible speeds without gaining tunnel vision. There was also the fact that his muscles were no longer used to being pushed so hard, so he would need to work them out more so they would regain their strength. It wasn't until half an hour later that he felt a presence in his senses and dropped to the ground. Keeping his body in a relaxed position, ready to strike out at anything that might threaten him, Naruto shouted. You may as well come out now. You've already failed miserably at trying to hide your presence from me. From behind one of the trees a tall individual stepped out into the open. It seemed to be some sort of strange mummy-like being, similar to the ones Naruto had seen in the movies. It had a black and gold pharaoh's head dress, glowing yellow eyes and also had black bracer and greaves. 1. Impressive, most never even sense my presence before I kill them. The mummy stepped forward and looked over Naruto, who was giving him a neutral look, but with a small placid smile that then stretched to the corners of his face, his eyes unchanged. It was a very good scare tactic he had learned while traveling, among other things. Ho, I believe you will find it nearly impossible to hide your presence from me. Someone once told me that the only way to hide your presence completely is to be dead, since a living person still has a presence, no matter how hard you try to hide it. Ah, but I'm rambling, aren't I? Why don't you tell me your name so we can get this started? The mummy tilted its head at the boy's even tone or lack of fear towards his appearance. If he was honest, it was a little disconcerting for him. Very well, I'll grant you this last request before I finish my job. I am Ankh, of the Tepkufan assassins. I have been requested by my employer to take out the individual known as Uzumaki Naruto, a human with blonde hair, blue eyes and distinct marks on his cheeks. I was fortunate that someone else attempted to find you, but it was easy to convince him to not get in my way. The fool ran so fast it was almost pathetic. Ankh shook his head thinking about the alien shapeshifter, Gibri, that he'd sent on his way. Ah, well, knowing my luck, the person you got rid of was probably one of Lala's fiancés, so I suppose I owe you some thanks. It would have been truly annoying to deal with someone who I simply find isn't worth my time. Naruto's eyes didn't change as he stared at the man, something else about what he said clicking in his mind. And you said assassins? How interesting. I suppose the king's proclamation has spread quite far for people to be hiring an assassin to kill me. Ankh nodded, moving his feet apart and raising his arms, the bandage-like appendages coming off them both. You would be correct in that presumption. But I'm not without some honor, so I'll offer you a chance to live if you call off your engagement to the Princess of Deviluk. Naruto's expression didn't change, he just kept smiling with that neutral look in his eyes. Again, I find myself thanking you for such a courteous offer. But given the situation, I find such an offer to be unnecessary. I apologize, since I can't accept your generous offer, and I know that being an assassin doesn't allow for chances of mercy like this. Then again, I don't think it's my well-being you should really worry about. I mean, you aren't going to beat me. Ankh blinked in surprise before feeling irritated at the boy's words. You should watch your words, human. Disrespect me in such a way again and your death will be both slow and painful. He growled his words out as Naruto just stared into his eyes. A small flash showing the image of his burnt remains and a headdress with no glowing eyes appeared within his mind, causing Ankh to flinch. Sorry, I had no intention of offending you. It's just that most assassins would have killed their target by now, or at the very least attempted to. Especially once they realized that by talking I could simply be distracting you from your job. I may not have mentioned it before, but I have some experience with assassins. By now, most would have done their job and would have either attacked or retreated depending on their thoughts when I first felt their presence. You have done neither. But then, I guess I shouldn't expect much from someone who looks like every bondage lover's wet dream. Ankh smashed his fist against a tree, making splinters fly out of it. How dare you? You mocked me even before your death, Ankh roared in anger. Why are you losing your temper? That's rather unprofessional of you. Naruto's words set Ankh off, who shot forward at him in rage and just wanting to shut him up, once and for all. He extended his bandages out to ensnare the boy, but was unable to when the blonde jumped up and bounced off the tree, shooting past Naruto, crossed his arms in an X formation across his chest. Ninpo. Sume Awase. Calling out the old technique that Yugito, another ninja and a powerful woman, had used, Naruto's fingernails extended into deadly long and sharp claws. Seeing as though you are made up of cloth, I think this technique is best to defeat you. I hope you don't mind if I end up shredding off a few layers as a result. Naruto's face changed from the placid expression to that of a trained killer, making Ankh see that this was no ordinary human. Releasing more tendrils of bandages and forming them into a sharp drill, Ankh sent them forward in an attempt to impale the blonde. In response, Naruto rushed forward, his footsteps so silent that they seemed to simply glide over the ground. As he swerved past the drill, his clawed hands slashed out, severing the bandages. As the shredded bandages fluttered to the ground, Ankh noticed that they were charred where the blonde had cut them. Ankh, seeing this, made a large jump away from Naruto, who stared at him with the eyes of a man who had seen far more death than he had. The blonde spoke, his tone so cold it made him shiver. I hope that you see just how much of a mistake you made coming after my life. I doubt that. You have the same number of kills in your life as I do. Forgive me, Ankh, but I'm afraid this mission is a failed one. Please give my regards to your employer and hopefully he'll get a refund. Oh, and turn around. Now scared out of his mind, all Ankh could was what the blonde said, as if not doing so would cost him his life. Turning, he saw another Naruto standing right behind him, his glowing red claws extended, embers coming off them. I told you I was distracting while we spoke. With that, Ankh's world went black as the slitted eyes of Naruto descended on him and he screamed into the trees. Arriving back at school, Naruto replaced himself with his clone before deciding that he should probably give Zaston a call. Once the man had picked up, he told the Deviluk bodyguard about Ankh and that they should pick him up and ship him off to his home planet, wherever that was. Zaston had been a little frantic hearing about the race that Naruto had gone up against, but had soon calmed down after Naruto had reassured him that the fight hadn't lasted long and he had sustained no injuries during it. That fight was kind of pathetic, Kurama commented, agreed with his tenant and friend's assessment of the battle. We barely even had to do anything. To be honest, I was expecting a bit more from our first encounter with an assassin from space. While Naruto didn't have any particular desire to fend off alien assassins, he had to agree with Kurama that he had expected something more from the fight. Yeah, then again, I never expected an alien assassin to look like something out of The Mummy either. Still, it was nice to see that her tactics still work. She always did manage to rile her opponents before crushing them beneath her feet. Naruto brought up a memory of a small, weak-bodied but incredibly powerful woman he'd met and helped out a little during his travels. It was her soft, calm way of speaking that he enjoyed implementing in a lot of his fights against tough fighters, when he got the chance, of course. She died how she wanted at the end, although we at least stopped her from making a big mistake in Edo. Kurama had been impressed by the women, remembering how she had kept a straight face despite all of the mental and physical pain she had been put through. Yeah, her story and the swords ended better after we kept traveling with them. But why don't we get back to the subject at hand? You and I can reminisce about our past later over some sake. Right now we've seen that assassins have started coming for us, and will likely weed out the lesser people after my life in seeking out Lala's hand. If I'm right, my defeating of Ankh will both deter some and goad others into pursuing me that much more. We have to make sure that our fights don't end up dragging innocent people into them. We both know how assassins think. Kurama nodded, knowing Naruto had taken a short few years working as an assassin during the Three Kingdoms era in China, though he had kept his killings to corrupt politicians and would-be warlords. If that's the case, you should make sure to always have a clone on standby so you can replace yourself with it and lead them away from your friends, and mine once I regain a body. Kurama was looking forward to being hugged by the girls for looking cute and adorable. It had been the main factor that caused him to become a pervert of Jiraiya's caliber. The ancient Kitsune could truly see why the man had loved S. The feeling he got when the girls pressed him against their soft bosom was unlike anything he had ever felt before in his life. Just thinking about it sent pleasant tendrils up his spine. I'll check by the shelter we made under the house for foxes that end up getting lost in the city and see if there are any old ones that we can use. Kurama had always told Naruto to make a fox home under the house for other foxes just in case they ended up lost in the city they were living in, or couldn't find a proper home. Naruto had never minded, having liked taking care of the foxes when they came out from under the house and into his garden. Good, and remember, a male body please. Naruto chuckled hearing the pleading tone in Kurama's voice. He silently promised to get the Kitsune a male body before walking to his meeting spot. It was on Wednesdays that Naruto had a free period that he shared with another student and friend. She was a very talented kendo practitioner who had seen him practicing one time when he had decided to skip PE to see if there was anything fun to help quench his boredom. Having been impressed, practically drooling, over his skills with a sword, she had asked, i.e. demanded, that he spar with her. Of course, Naruto had happily obliged and ended up beating her into the ground. Rather than be upset, she had been ecstatic, feeling that if she practiced with someone better than her with a blade, she would improve by leaps and bounds. It worked too. While she had never, and would never, beat him in a sword fight, she was by and large the best kendo practitioner in the entire school, possibly even all of Japan. Walking into the training room where all of the martial arts clubs practiced after school, he spotted his friend already swinging her shinai as she stood on the training mat. Rin Kuju was a strong-willed girl who also served as a bodyguard to her friend in the school. She was a loyal friend who had near-prodigious skills in kendo. She held a great respect for Naruto due to his prowess with a sword, having told him as much. Rin had long dark brown hair that she kept tied into a high ponytail behind her head. A pair of short bangs hovering at eye level covered either side of her face, parting in the center. And a pair of longer bangs hung down near her ears, reaching past her S. Her most defining trait, however, were her sharp, narrow eyes, which he knew hid a cunning intellect and held the observational qualities necessary in a serious kendo user. "You're running a little late, Naruto," Rin said without preamble. She was never one for small talk. At least, not until after she had gotten what she wanted. Naruto just smirked at her, loosening his tie and taking off his uniform jacket. "Sorry, but if I told you the reason I was late, you wouldn't believe me." He had been tempted to tell her that he had gotten lost on the road of life, but figured the inside joke would have been lost on her. Shaking his head at the thought, Naruto walked over to the weapons rack and picked up a shinai, testing the weight and balance of several before choosing the one he liked best. He moved back over to the training mat and took his own stance, awaiting her signal. "Knowing you, perhaps. However, we are not here for idle chatter, are we?" With that, Rin dashed forward as did Naruto, and the two began trading blows with their bamboo swords, while also dodging what would be deadly strikes had the weapons been real. "True, but you don't mind chatting while we spar, do you? I was kinda hoping to know whether or not you and your friends knew about my change in marital status." Naruto ducked under a blow that would have decapitated him in real life, allowing the shinai to just barely graze his hair. Coming back up, Naruto swung his own bamboo sword in an upward stroke that Rin was forced to jump backwards to dodge. A small pause ensued as his opponent tried to find a weakness in his defenses. She didn't, and thus, decided to just charge in and hope an opening would present itself. "We did hear about that," a snort. "It's kind of hard not to when everybody in school from seniors to freshmen are talking about it. Though I will admit it was quite a shock to Aya and Sake-sama. Although we did learn that it was done by your parents without you knowing. Aya was hoping to ask if you knew anything more about them." Naruto went for an overhead strike, which Rin made to block. However, the blow was far stronger than she had expected and forced her to kneel down, her left knee almost touching the mat. As the pressure from his blade was taken away, Rin jumped back, and then took a step forward, swinging her blade upwards from her left hip to right shoulder. The attack was dodged entirely when Naruto slid his body in close before she could finish the attack, moving into her guard and forcing her to jump back lest she end up getting taken out at the knees. He had used such a strategy before. Naruto shook his head as a small pause entered the battle. As they started up again, with Rin taking another swing at him, he said, "I haven't had much chance to speak with Lala's father about it, so for now, no. Speaking of which, when do I get to meet those friends of yours? In all the times we've practiced I've only heard a little about them." "Why is that?" Rin thrust her sword forward. An attack was set to impale Naruto through the chest. Naruto countered by twisting his blade around hers and hitting the bottom, knocking it higher into the air, only for Rin to spin on her feet and try to attack him with a diagonal downward slash. Naruto rolled out of the way and smiled due to Rin's improved skills. Usually, he'd have hit her using that counter. However, this time she attacked, knowing he would do that, and used the move as a feint. "Well, I am the bodyguard to Sake-sama, and both of us look after Aya, so I suppose we are more trying to work her confidence to talk to you. You are, after all, quite infamous in the school, Naruto-san." A stab barely missed her cheek as her words left her lips. "Well, I am the bodyguard to Sake-sama, and both of us look after Aya, who is a tad shy. We are working on upping her confidence before I introduce you to her. You are, after all, quite infamous as this school, Naruto-san." A stab barely missed her cheek as the words left her lips. Bringing her sword around, she locked blades with Naruto, forcing his shinai down before she came up in a slash. It was dodged, of course, but the move showed Rin was learning. It was an Uzumaki Ugi, after all. "Mo, I thought we were friends," Naruto teased as he ducked past a horizontal slash. "Didn't we agree that since we're friends you would no longer use such a formal honorific?" Rin realized her slip of the tongue just as she was blocking his incoming sword strike. She was so used to speaking formally due to the teachings of her family. After she and Naruto had become sparring partners, however, he had asked her to disregard all formalities when speaking to him, claiming that since they were now friends she shouldn't have to use them. It had been difficult at first, and many a night she had gone home with several lumps on her head for not remembering his request. Still, she couldn't help but smile. Despite all of his skills with a blade, Naruto was very laid back and easy to get along with. "My apologies, it just slipped out. Anyways, I believe I and Sake-sama have been able to help her become a bit more outgoing, so she should be fine. Sake-sama knows of you, of course, but hasn't really had the chance to actually speak with you. However, I can assure you that she has been looking forward to it." After several more clashes of their shinai, Naruto and Rin jumped apart, pausing for a second before running back in. The two came together, crossing swords in a final clash. Naruto's was lined up just below Rin's chin, barely grazing against her neck, while Rin's was stopped no less than a centimeter above his forehead. They retracted their blades and moved several paces away, bowing to signal the end of their match. "If you want I can wait here for a while and meet them now. My next lesson is English and I'm already pretty fluent with that language," Naruto offered, telling the truth since he spoke perfect English and as a result was at times not seen as a foreigner when he was traveling there. In fact, given his blonde hair, blue eyes and powerful build and sometimes lazy attitude, people had often mistaken him for an American. He wiped his face with a towel, while Rin did the same, opening the first 3 buttons on top of her shirt to help herself cool down. "I think that will be acceptable and I'm sure Sake-sama will be pleased." Rin smiled, imagining the happy expression her charge and friend would have at finally meeting Naruto after watching him from afar and Rin speaking so well about his character. As the pair waited they made small talk, talking about inconsequential and everyday issues. It was only a few minutes after their spar when the doors opened and 2 girls walked in. Aya was a bespectacled girl like Mio, but had much longer hair that was a darker shade than his perverted friends. Her eyes were also a deep amethyst that almost reminded Naruto of his mother's eyes. Her gaze looked at him, and she gained a healthy blush. Seeing this, the blonde gave her his usual smile, making her squeak and hide behind the other girl. The other girl, Sake he presumed, was a little taller than Aya, about 3 inches so, and had long blonde hair that flowed down her back in waves, but also had 2 small buns tied off at the sides of her head, as well as 2 spiral curls hanging over her shoulders. She had a regal and proud bearing, which the blonde shinobi knew was due to her family being part of a small group of nobility that still existed. Sake cheeks were tinted slightly red as she gazed at Naruto with amber-colored eyes. Offering the 2 girls a cheerful grin as he walked over to them with Rin, Naruto said, "Hello, you must be Sake-san and Aya-san. Rin-chan has told me a lot about you too. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, it's a pleasure to meet you." Naruto offered a small bow to the 2 girls. Sake smiled a bit as she reached out with her left hand and flipped one of her spiral curls over her shoulder before offering the blonde man a smile, her cheeks still slightly red. "Uzumaki Naruto, your reputation precedes you. Aside from the fact that it's nearly impossible to move through the halls without hearing your name at least once, Rin has told us nothing but praise about you. It's lovely to finally meet you face to face, although I wish we had a little more time." As if accentuating her words, the bell rang, signifying the end of the class and the beginning of the next. Naruto had to hold back a grin at Saki's formal way of speaking. Deciding to reply to her in kind, said, "It is a shame that our meeting has been cut short. However, if you wish to speak some more, why don't you 3 stop by class 1A, during lunch tomorrow and I can introduce you to my friends. Of course, that includes Aya-san as well." He looked over at Aya who gave a meek nod while Sake merely graced him with a smile. "That would be a pleasant idea, Naruto, and I suppose we shall see you tomorrow." Naruto gave them one last smile as he left the room, leaving the 3 girls to begin walking toward their own class. As they walked, Sake hummed in thought as she looked at where she had last seen Naruto entering the door to the school. "He is rather handsome now that I have seen him up close." Saki's comment received a nod from Aya and Rin. "It's fortunate that his engagement is also temporary, Sake-sama. There is news that Lala-san only 6 months in which to persuade Naruto to accepting the proposal fully, or find a better suitor. Although, in my own opinion, there aren't many better suited than Naruto." Rin knew what Saki's plan would be, and to be honest, a part of her felt a bit depressed knowing that her charge and friend would be the one to get him. Indeed, it's fortunate that we have time to learn about Naruto-kun, and make him see that, Sake Tenjuin, the one who is known as the most beautiful girl in school, would be a much better match for him. Oh ho ho ho. She gave a haughty laugh, holding the back of her hand in front of her face. Seeing this, Rin and Aya couldn't help but sweat drop.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.